Chapter 610. After the East Sea Dragon King took over the throne, he became more magnanimous. He didn't purge anyone, but he said that he would let bygones be bygones. This great General Fubo was originally a little fiendish demon that didn't make the cut. Because he stood on the right side at the beginning, he got the title of Following the Dragon, and was asked to patrol the East Sea every day. As for Shang Guanyu, he didn't see it with his own eyes, but he heard it from the demon on Mount Penglai. But it was about 80 to 90% accurate. There shouldn't be any lies in this demon general's memory. If there was something he didn't know, it was just something he didn't know. For example, Shinryu made this goddess Penglai the demon immortal guarding the mountain. In that case, what exactly was she? Nowadays, Li Yunxin was experienced and knowledgeable. He had seen birds and beasts that had attained the Tao. He had also seen ghost cultivators. It wasn't like there weren't any stools or carrying pole spirits, and he himself was a dragon child. But he had never seen Mrs. Sanhua and Goddess Penglai. When he was with Sanhua, he thought it was because she was seriously injured and lost her mind, so she was confused. But after seeing Sanhua on Mount Yinshan, and Goddess Penglai here, he knew this kind of thing. Although they looked stupid, he understood it. Looking at the memory of this Supreme General Fubo, they were originally like this. They didn't have any trauma, they always looked crazy. What is it? Li Yunxin realized this was a key point. He suspected Mrs. Sanhua before, but he wasn't sure. Now there was Goddess Penglai in front of him. If he could get the inside story from her, maybe the curtain that had been covering him was lifted halfway. Without a doubt, Mrs. Sanhua was sent to him. The mastermind behind the scenes was most likely Mu Nanju, to protect him and to find out if he was the real Crown Prince Xie Sheng. Then this Goddess Penglai. What is her background? Which side is she on? Thinking of this, he slowly closed the book. He looked up at the female demon. The cabin was illuminated by talismans. However, it was not a bright light. Instead, it was a faint yellow flame that hung in the air. Now that he had a terrifying thought in his mind, his eyes were filled with undisguised malice. Thus, when his face was illuminated by the yellow flames, it became even more uncertain, as though he was an evil spirit. So you used to be a profound realm demon. I apologize for my rudeness. Li Yunxin looked at her maliciously as he slowly paced back and forth. This demon general's head is filled with a lot of things. But there are some things. The more he knew, the more curious he became. For example, what exactly are you? And why did the Shinryu confer you the title in the first place? If I ask you, will you answer me honestly? At this point, he had slowly walked to the front of Goddess Penglai. He had been looking through the memory of the demon general and the female monster at the same time, which scared her so much that she curled up into a ball and hid in the corner of the cabin. Now that Li Yunxin was walking in front of her, the demoness seemed to know that something was wrong. After all, she used to be a profound realm expert. After witnessing Li Yunxin's means, she immediately realized that this guy was incredible. He was at least a profound realm expert. With her current situation, what could she do when such a super demon had a bad thought? Therefore, she screamed and rose to the corner of the cabin roof. I don't know. I don't know either. But where could she hide? With a gloomy smile on his face, Li Yunxin suddenly stretched his neck like a noodle. He put his face in front of the female monster and stared at her. You said you don't know, and I don't know whether what you said is true or not. I have to break you up and see for myself. The female monster looked really scared. She immediately turned into a cloud of mist and ran around the cabin crazily, screaming, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know either. I don't know how to tell you either. You might as well just kill me. No. Don't kill me, don't kill me. I won't know even if you kill me. Li Yunxin looked at her running around crazily for a while, then suddenly retracted his neck and shouted, How many people like you are around the East Sea? The female monster shouted, I don't know. I only know that I'm alone. At this point, as if she had grasped a life-saving straw, her body suddenly stopped. I know how to get to the Dragon Island. From Mount Penglai, I know how to get there. The Dragon King of the East Sea also knows. Li Yunxin sneered and said, When I catch him, I will interrogate him slowly. Ba. The female monster spun in the air. That's because the Shinryu opened the sea ban. The Shinryu wants to let people in so he can get in. I know how to sneak in. Sneak in. Do you want to sneak in? No one knows. Li Yunxin suddenly stopped laughing, as if the female monster's words had triggered something in his mind. He thought for a while, then said, Why didn't you say so earlier? The female monster looked like she was about to cry. A faint black fog was emitted from her body. I just remembered. Sealing me on the Dragon Island is to suppress something. I sneak in from there. Li Yunxin was silent for 2 breaths. Then he smiled and squinted at her. Actually, you weren't the only one in the East Sea. You guarded Mount Penglai. There were 2 others similar to you. One guarded Mount Ingzhou and the other guarded Mount Fanghu. Because the 3 mountains never appeared at the same time, this General Fubo didn't know, right? You didn't say anything about this. The female monster's body suddenly stopped. As if she was extremely surprised, she screamed, "How did you know?" Li Yunxin tilted his head and stared at her for a while, then said, "I guessed. But it seems that I guessed right. You guys are indeed this kind of things. So that's what happened." He said this half to himself, then smiled sinisterly. "Okay. I won't kill you. I'm just kidding. How could I really kill you, even if I want to die? It's not the right time yet." The black fog that the female monster turned into trembled again, as if she didn't understand that Li Yunxin was still questioning her, but now she seemed to have understood something. So she didn't want to scatter her soul. As if he knew more than her now. As if she had some kind of speculation before. But now, because of 1 or 2 points in her words, she was suddenly enlightened. That was all she could think of. Li Yunxin suddenly waved his big sleeve, and the talisman collected Goddess Penglai again. It was already noon when the merchants ran to the deck. Many things happened later, and it was already afternoon. When Li Yunxin finished dealing with the demon general and the female monster and got out of the cabin, it was already dark. The wounded were sent for treatment, but it was still unknown whether they could survive. Xie Xing went back to his cabin alone and closed the door. At this time he should be safe. The immortal lord who appeared on the waves told them not to cause any more trouble. Xie Xing should think that the immortal lord was thinking about him. This meant that the ship had reached the protection of the dragons. He could find the organization soon. Lu Baishui stayed on the deck to comfort the anxious people. He walked from the bow to the stern, directing the sailors to repair the masts and the ship buildings damaged by the waves. At this time, the 2 huge ships on the sea were brightly lit. People could be seen everywhere like a small construction site. But when Li Yunxin appeared behind Lu Baishui, it was already late at night. The sea breeze blew. The repair work came to an end. There was no one on the deck except for those on night duty. And Lu Baishui was eating in a sheltered place next to the ship building. He was eating a piece of bread with some pickled vegetables. It meant that he was sharing weal and woe with others. But there was no one around him. He leaned against the shadow and couldn't see anyone. Li Yunxin stood behind him for a while. Lu Baishui slowly swallowed the food and put down the hand holding the bread. Even so, he stood for a while and turned around. He said calmly, "Where did you go, Brother Li?" At this time there was still a blood stain on his face. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound was swollen, making him look a little strange. To deal with some private matters. Li Yunxin glanced at the bread in his hand and then at his wound. "So you are Lu Fei. You know that the Dragon King of the East Sea does exist and even had some contact with him." Lu Baishui nodded and said, "I hid it from Brother Li. But I have my difficulties." "I want to hear it." Lu Baishui sighed and shook his head. He looked around and found a place to sit down. "I saw that you didn't have any other thoughts. I just felt that we were on the same wavelength. Then you asked me, is she your Ling Ci? Li Yunxin was silent for a while and said stiffly, "Yes. I didn't have any suspicions about your Ling Ci. Until later. I heard about what happened in the governor's mansion." Lu Baishui smiled bitterly. "I heard that there was a young cultivator in the governor's mansion. I thought it was Brother Li, so I hid it from you. I didn't expect it to be you." Li Yunxin nodded slowly. "What about you and the Dragon King of the East Sea?" "I'm just a person." Lu Baishui touched the wound on his nose gently. "It's just that the Dragon King of the East Sea is lost. There are many people like me who work for the Dragon King of the East Sea. It's an exaggeration to say that we work for him. We just collect some rare treasures on the road and offer them to him. He guarantees good weather for people like us who make a living on the sea." "Brother Li. But who are you?" "The one on the wave." Li Yunxin nodded. "I know. But it's better that you don't know about me." He was silent for a while and thought for a while. "Since you are loyal, I will guarantee your safety." "Since you are loyal, is it true that you are hiding in Aquarius Bay?" Lu Baishui realized that Li Yunxin's tone had changed. He was not the gentle Li Yunxin from before. Instead he became cold and a little chilly. Like a knife. Maybe this was the real him. He shook his head gently again. "Aquarius Bay is just a stop. In fact, it's in..." Li Yunxin raised her hand and interrupted him. "Brother Lu. Brother Lu, I'm not here to find out where you are. I just want to tell you to leave the East Sea as soon as possible. Something big may happen here in a few days. If you leave too late, I'm afraid someone will die." Lu Baishui was stunned and wanted to frown. But as soon as he frowned, he hissed. The wound caused by Xie Xing's lightsaber was still there. It was okay to be expressionless, but if he spoke too much, it would hurt. "Brother Li, can you tell me in detail?" He had to keep a straight face. "Leave the East Sea." "How far away?" "Leave the East Sea, that is, go back to land." Li Yunxin looked at him. "There may be a war in the East Sea." "War? Oh, with whom?" Li Yunxin stared at Lu Baishui for a while and smiled. "The dragon that jumped out of the sea during the day is my cousin. If you want to talk about a war, it's with the Dragon King of the East Sea." Lu Baishui suddenly opened his eyes wide and took a step back. "Brother Li, the person I'm looking for is with the Dragon King of the East Sea. Of course, I'm going to find trouble with him." Li Yunxin said in a low voice. "Brother Lu, take care of yourself." After saying this, he turned around and disappeared in the air. Lu Baishui still stood there, stunned and speechless. Although he had many ideas, he still couldn't accept the fact that Li Yunxin, who looked like a human being, was a demon. And if he didn't lie, he was a big demon who thought he could compete with the Dragon King of the East Sea. However, such an identity could not be matched with the Li Yunxin that he had seen, no matter how he looked at it. He stood in the shadow in a daze, listening to the sea breeze blowing in his ears. After standing like this for a long time, he heard something else: footsteps. The brothers on duty were also walking. But these were obviously not the footsteps of his people. The person walking should be good at martial arts and could barely be regarded as a second-rate master. Now he was walking cautiously in front and behind him. There must be something unspeakable about someone walking like this. It was ridiculous. Just a moment ago he was thinking about the East Sea, the Dragon King of the East Sea, and Brother Li, who might be a big demon. But now, the footsteps of ordinary people, which were insignificant to those existences, startled him again. Lu Baishui felt that his brain was a bit numb. Too many things had happened on this ship that were beyond common sense. Now all of them came back to him. He felt that his feeling before he went out to sea was correct. There was a big whirlpool. And he was falling deeper and deeper into this whirlpool. He sighed inwardly and told himself to move forward cautiously to look at the man. The ship was very long, and so was the ship's building. Although it was divided into 3 floors, each floor was not a whole space, but was divided into small rooms like a house on land. He was now near the bow of the ship, looking at the belly of the ship, and saw a woman. It was very dark on the deck. He couldn't see her face clearly. But there was only one woman on this ship, Pan He. Her footsteps were light, and her movements were agile. She raised her hand to touch the railing, and silently jumped to the 2nd floor. Lu Baishui sighed in his heart for the umpteenth time. It seemed that something was going to happen again. Now, after seeing what happened during the day and hearing what Li Yunxin said, even a man like him felt powerless in his heart. This was not a matter of being depressed and dispirited, but knowing that there were some things that he really couldn't do. For example, if the demons really fought on the sea, what could he do? This trip to the sea was to do his own things and also to solve some problems. He didn't expect that now. He was the incidental thing in other people's eyes. His brother Li and Xie Xing seemed to be out of his control. Now this woman had jumped out. He had a hunch that the things that happened to this woman after her death might not be something that he could control. But there were hundreds of his brothers on the ship. If he didn't bite the bullet and go to sea, who would? Lu Baishui shook his head, and his figure also rose in the night, going to the 2nd floor. Chapter 6:11. Now there was only one person living on the 2nd floor. Xie Xing. At the same time that Lu Baishui noticed Pan He's movement, Li Yunxin also noticed it. He was now standing on the top of the main mast that hadn't been broken. The huge ship became smaller under him, and the open sails swelled in the sea breeze. As far as his eyes could see, he could only see the boundless sea. The sea was sparkling under the moonlight, as if the ship was sailing on the back of a giant dragon. Pan He's every move was in his perception. Even if this woman was a martial arts master compared to mortals, her voice was still too loud in the perception of a mysterious realm monster. Her feet stepped on the wooden planks, her palms touched the wall, and she gently exhaled. All these were heard by Li Yunxin, and he made precise movements. He asked Pheasant to erase Pan He's memory of that night, but he didn't get rid of her, because he wanted to let her doubt ferment in her heart. This woman was not smart in his eyes, but she was not stupid among mortals. A Freemason in charge of the Donghai nation suddenly lost her memory on the ship, and her wrist was broken. She should know that someone had done something to her. Someone did something to her but didn't kill her and just didn't let her remember. Maybe this person was not completely hostile. It was possible that they were on the same side in some ways. It was just that she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and provoked him, so he attacked her. So this not completely hostile person, in Pan He's opinion, who could it be? It could only be the Donghai nation's grand manager of Nanmuju. This time, Li Yunxin came to the sea to use these two ships as isolation cabins. If he could get rid of the last tail of Nanmuju and the Freemasonry, he would really disappear from their control. However, he found the Freemasonry but not the Nanmuju. He was a mysterious realm monster and he was powerful but not omnipotent. Since he couldn't find them, the Freemasonry, who had been dealing with Nanmuju for hundreds of years, should be able to do it better than him. He spared Pan He's life and only erased the memory of that night because of this. He asked her to find the Grand Manager for him. Unexpectedly, her gun was useless. He had been paranoid for a few days but he still couldn't get anything done. It seemed that either the shopkeeper was not on the ship, or he had hidden himself too well. Li Yunxin sighed. These people from the new Freemasonry were really useless. Only Shanji, the ninth young master, and Lu Baishui knew his real identity. Xie Xing knew that there were people stronger than him in the sea, but he didn't seem to think that they were enemies. The ninth young master had made a smart move by appearing on the waves during the day, so that the people on the ship would be on their guard and not cause any more trouble, but it did not frighten them. Xie Xing was meditating in the cabin just like he did a few days ago. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and carefully observed. Sometimes, like now, when he was close to Xie Xing and there were not many people around, he could sense the qi activity that Xie Xing exuded when he was cultivating. Just by looking at one spot, one would be able to tell the whole picture. Thus, one could estimate Xie Xing's cultivation progress and speed. The cultivation speed of this true prince could be said to be 1,000 miles a day. He seemed to have a treasure in his hand. The spiritual qi on the treasure was not worth mentioning for Li Yunxin's realm, but it was useful for Xie Xing's cultivation. Tonight, his qi activity was a little unstable. Li Yunxin seemed to have reached a critical juncture in his cultivation, and even showed signs of qigong deviation occasionally. But the golden light method that Xie Xing cultivated was given by him. From a certain point of view, Li Yunxin's cultivation foundation, especially for some basic things, was excellent. He had also glanced at the golden light technique. The contents were too shallow for him, so he was well aware of what might happen when he cultivated it. Because of this, he felt it was a little strange. Xie Xing should not show signs of qigong deviation at this juncture. The other strange thing was Pan He. The smell of this woman tonight was a little special. Li Yunxin didn't look at her. Instead, he was smelling and listening. So tonight she smelled more fragrant than usual. He stood on the top of the mast, frowned and thought for a while. Suddenly he understood. So he drew a circle in the void in front of him, and the scene he wanted to see appeared in the circle. This method, called round light mirror, was convenient, but it had to be used with caution. If Xie Xing's breath was not chaotic tonight, it was very likely that he would be found out. Then he saw, Xie Xing was wearing only his underclothes, sitting cross-legged in the cabin. His eyes were closed, as if he had reached a bottleneck in his cultivation. At this time, Pan He had walked to the door of Xie Xing's room. Lu Baishui was watching from the other side of the second floor, trying to figure out what Pan He was going to do. But he was just a mortal after all and could only see the vague appearance. Pan He stopped in front of the door and made a strange move. She combed her hair. Normally, she should have been vigilant when she was lurking here at night. But now she combed her hair as if she was going to see her lover. Then the woman tugged at her collar again. She opened her collar a little, revealing her chest. Pan He was bought by Wu Jiasong. In this era she was called a beautiful middle-aged woman, but in the era of Li Yunxin she was actually only a beautiful 24 or 25 years old woman. She had a fair complexion, and as she pulled, her snow-white breasts looked a little soul-stirring under the moonlight. Li Yunxin snorted with interest. He saw Pan He reach out her hand and do something on the door, and it opened. As soon as the door opened, she immediately dashed in and closed the door. Such a sound could not be hidden from Xie Xing's ears. He immediately opened his eyes on the bed, and stared at the woman at the door with bright eyes. The cabin he was in was quite large, and Pan He was more than 10 steps away from him. There were only 3 candles in the cabin, and the light from them was limited. Therefore, even with Xie Xing's current cultivation, he could only see the appearance of the woman. He seemed to be prepared for this. He gloomily stared at Pan He for 2 breaths and said in a low voice, "Who are you?" Li Yunxin noticed that he began to circulate his qi. Spiritual energy filled his body, ready to attack at any time. But Pan He laughed lightly. It was the kind of laughter that a woman would make intentionally, and it was completely different from normal laughter. Even her voice became sweet. I'm the incense holder, I'm here to deliver incense to Taoist priest. The last two words were enunciated lightly and dragged out. Her tone was tactful and full of provocation. It was as if the atmosphere in the room had suddenly become too sweet. As she spoke, she stared at Xie Xing and slowly walked towards him. When she took the first step, Xie Xing didn't say anything and didn't stop her. It was as if he wanted to see what she was going to do. When she took the second step, Pan He pulled open her belt. The soft silk belt slid down and fell on her outstretched thighs. And because the belt was pulled open, her snow-white and round thighs were faintly visible. She wasn't wearing underwear. The unique fragrance of a woman's body spread in the room. Xie Xing slightly frowned but still didn't say anything. So Pan He took the third step. The silk belt on her thighs slid down, and so did her outer robe. So a delicate female body with only a light pink doo-doo was exposed in the room. It was winter, and although the temperature on the sea was getting warmer, people still wore quite a lot of clothes. In this era, there was no three-dimensional tailoring, so the graceful figure of a woman was hidden under the loose clothes. Therefore, when she took off her outer robe and revealed her snow-white slender legs, smooth collarbones and round and towering breasts, she finally understood why Wu Jiasong had bought her in the first place. The body hidden under her clothes was rare and wonderful in this era. So she took another 3 steps. Pan He walked to the candlestick on the table. Xie Xing finally saw her face clearly. His eyebrows gradually relaxed and he squinted his eyes, and finally said the second sentence, "What do you want?" Pan He stopped in her tracks and gently covered her chest with her bandaged hand. Her doo-doo was very small and thin. Because of the cold, a slight bulge could be seen. At this time, when she covered it with her hand, it had a different effect. She pressed the doo-doo down a little and her chest was even more aroused. And her flat snow-white lower abdomen was also exposed, reflecting the enchanting undulations in the candlelight. This kind of provocative posture made her voice even more seductive. "Taoist priest, do you want me after asking clearly, or do you want me, then ask?" Xie Xing's eyes narrowed even more. He stared at Pan He for about 3 or 4 seconds and then said, "Take it off." His voice was a little hoarse. Pan He put her hand down. "In your body." Pan He smiled and pulled the back of her neck with her left hand. The last piece of clothing on her seductive body fell to the ground, completely exposing her beautiful body in front of Xie Xing. Li Yunxin laughed. Xie Xing's throat moved. After 2 breaths, he suddenly raised his hands, and from his sleeves scattered 6 or 7 golden talismans. They fell on the ground, the ceiling and the wall, protecting the room. Then he shouted in a low voice, "Come here." At this time, his voice was full of desire, even slightly trembling. Pan He twisted her waist and slowly walked over, but Xie Xing had already waved his hand again. This snow-white body was pulled into his arms by an invisible force. The cultivator turned into a fierce beast in an instant, and his clothes were also taken off. 2 fiery bodies immediately tangled together. Pan He first let out a coquettish exclamation, and then she let out an uncontrollable moan. Then there was the sound of continuous panting. The huge ship was still moving in the night wind. Lu Baishui didn't know what happened in the cabin. Xie Xing's talismans isolated the cabin, and mortals couldn't hear any sound. But Li Yunxin was still standing on the top of the mast, watching intently. After about a dozen breaths of time, Pan He was pressed onto the bed, and the first battle quickly ended. However, Xie Xing was full of fighting spirit and soon he started the second round. This time it took a little longer, about 10 breaths. Then he started the third round without stopping. Pan He was good in bed and she was flirtatious. Xie Xing was also a cultivator and he was full of energy. The first 2 times he held it in for a long time and after a hasty end he finally got into the mood. This time it took nearly an hour. When it came to the 4th round, Pan He finally began to beg for mercy. However, begging for mercy was also like provocation. It made Xie Xing, who had been silent all this while and only knew how to work hard, collide even more fiercely. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes, and he knew why Xie Xing's previous cultivation went wrong. 2 mortals. One was strong and the other was weak. Generally speaking, the stronger one had more desire in some aspects than the weaker one, let alone cultivators. Cultivation, the essence, qi and spirit. The true fire of Yuan Yang grew stronger with the health of the essence, qi and spirit. Without good guidance it would be difficult to suppress. At least before Li Yunxin turned 14, Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu had been guiding him in cultivation. Unknowingly they had helped him resolve this difficulty, and prevented him from burning like Xiexing. It was a pity that Xiexing started to cultivate the golden light method that Li Yunxin gave him. However, as mentioned earlier, the path of cultivation was very dangerous. It was not like the secular martial arts he learned in the grotto. Without guidance he ended up like this. But this was only part of the reason. The other part, this was probably a fact that every transmigrator couldn't avoid, coming to a world with the mentality of a game, and having martial arts that could override all living beings. If that person was originally interested in certain aspects and had a strong need for it, he had been cooped up in the deep mountains for more than 10 years. Now, on this relatively safe sea, he encountered an advantage that came knocking on his door, and he thought that in this world, he had the absolute ability to ensure his own safety and control the situation. Naturally, he didn't care. He would eat the meat first. Therefore, when the 5th round of fierce attacks began, Pan He's body was really limp, and she really didn't have the strength to speak anymore. She really closed her eyes in pain, and she wanted to struggle to push Xiexing away, but she couldn't use any strength at all. Li Yunxin sneered coldly. When this woman found him before, he thought that she only had petty tricks. Now it seemed, she really only had petty tricks. She should have thought of some of the things that Li Yunxin thought of. Perhaps because of her observation of Xiexing these days, she followed some clues and found out about his preferences and desires. Therefore this time she planned to use a direct and forceful method to obtain a channel for deep communication. Unexpectedly she overestimated her own worth. Xiexing was a native of this world, but he was a transmigrator. Just like when Li Yunxin came into this world, he didn't completely treat the people of this world as human. He was afraid that this woman would be in danger tonight. Just when Li Yunxin was thinking whether or not to interrupt Xiexing's good deed that had lasted for nearly 4 hours, he found another person. That person had run to the deck from the lower cabin, and now, without saying a word, he went straight to the 2nd floor of the ship. His footsteps were a little heavy and he seemed to be in a bad mood. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and looked. It was Wu Jiasong. He laughed and temporarily gave up on the idea of making a move. He found that Wu Jiasong had walked to the 2nd floor, to the door of Xiexing's cabin. After a slight hesitation, he slowly moved closer and put his ear on the door to listen. Naturally, he couldn't hear anything. After being stunned for a while, he turned around. But he didn't leave. With his hands in his sleeves, he sat against the wall beside the door. It seemed that he wanted to wait. Chapter 6:12. At this time Lu Baishui was waiting. Unexpectedly, his patience was also very good. Or maybe he couldn't fall asleep anyway. He sat in the corner of the 2nd floor with his eyes half closed. For as long as 4 hours, whenever a member of the crew on night duty was seen, a low whistle like the sound of the wind was used to signal them to retreat. Thus, when Xiexing's 5th round of fierce attacks ended and Pan He completely fainted, it had been almost 4 hours. In the cabin, Xiexing climbed up from the soft body. Half of the bed had collapsed. He was an emptiness realm expert and had a strong body, so he didn't care. However, Pan He's back was pressed against the broken stubble of the bed. Although there was a blanket as a barrier, it was still penetrated by the broken stubble in the waves of violent collisions. As a result, the bedding under her was now a patch of blood red. Presumably, her back was also badly mutilated. Xiexing glanced at Pan He's naked and twisted body. He walked to the table in the room, picked up a pot of herbal tea and drank it in one gulp. After burping, he threw the teapot away and picked up the satin belt that Pan He hung on the table to wipe his hands. Then he turned around and said, "Tell me, what do you want?" Right now, Pan He was in a delicate situation between being on the verge of death and being on the brink of death. She could feel that her life was slowly slipping away, but she was still conscious enough to hear Xiexing's words. Therefore she realized one thing. This person didn't just vent on her. He asked her, "What do you want?" because he wanted her to be on the verge of death. She had no doubt that if her answer didn't satisfy him, she would die in such an undignified way. Although she knew that this would be dangerous, she still had a strange feeling. She vaguely felt that she had failed somewhere before. She always failed. This vague thought gave her a strong feeling of unwillingness. But, when was the last time? Her gaze became a little unfocused. However, Xiexing's snort pulled her back to reality. "Don't talk. Are you really here to die?" She slowly squeezed out a weak voice. "Taoist? Priest? You must be joking. Of course it's..." At this point he suddenly coughed as if he was coughing up blood. But when he raised his head he choked on the blood. Blood spurted out from his mouth and his face turned green. He used all his strength to raise his hand and stared at Xiexing with wide eyes. Xie stared at her coldly for 2 or 3 breaths. His eyes roamed over her body again, as if he was wondering if this body was still suitable for him to use. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xian sneered coldly and flipped his hand. Pan He's body flipped over and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He coughed violently a few times before he could speak again. Thank you, Taoist priest." As he said this, he tried his best to smile. Unfortunately, his mouth was full of blood, so his smile was not pleasant. Xie looked at her and sneered, "You really are a bitch." After saying this, he summoned his inner clothes and slowly put them on. As he tied the belt, he sneered, "But I like it. I'll spare your life. Take your time." With that, he walked to the half-collapsed bed. He stretched his hand to the side of the bed and took out a green pill from his Taoist robe. He turned around, pried open Pan He's mouth and stuffed the pill inside. But this pill was as big as a pigeon's egg. How could Pan He swallow it at this moment? Moreover, her throat was injured earlier, so her face immediately showed a painful expression. Li Yunxin had been watching from the beginning to the end. At this time he knew what this pill was. All cultivators had to dabble in alchemy. Although he was not very good at it, in front of Xie he should be a decent student. He knew that this green pill was called the elemental brew pill. It was used as a catalyst to refine more advanced pills. It was considered a semi-finished product, a prototype. Ordinary cultivators didn't care about it. They didn't even want to eat it. This Xie should have gotten it from the governor's office. But he carried it with him, it was too shabby. He grew up under the attention of Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu for more than 10 years. He didn't think there was anything special about it. But after seeing Xie these days, seeing such a person who really had no one to watch over him and start cultivating from nothing, he realized how difficult it was and how dangerous it was. When he was young, he would occasionally play with it like a marble. But in Xie hands it became a treasure. Xie stuffed the treasure into Pan He's mouth, then pulled her messy hair and sat her up. He put a palm on her shoulder and said coldly, "I stuffed a pill in your mouth. You mortals can't bear this kind of immortal medicine. If you really swallow it, you'll either die from bloating or die from spiritual power. You need me to circulate my energy to help you digest it. Only then will you be able to bear it and keep your life. It will also heal your injuries. Now, I ask you one question and you answer one." Xie said coldly, "If you tell half a lie, I'll hang you on the mast like this." Pan He's mouth was stuffed, so she could only make muffled sounds in response. So Xie thought for 3 breaths and asked the first question, "Are you a member of the Freemasonry?" Pan He was startled. And Li Yunxin, who was at the top of the mast, let out a ha with interest. He had been standing and didn't feel tired. But at this time he seemed to be interested in watching a show. He first waved his hand and summoned a cloud under him. Then he touched the void, found a chair and sat down. Then he rubbed his palm on the little finger of his left hand. There was a golden pill in his palm. This thing was called Red Heaven Golden Pill. First, he used the essence brewing pill, that Xie regarded as a treasure to refine a furnace of red pill. Then he used the red pill and other natural treasures to refine 9 heaven powder. This 9 heaven powder was nourished in a fine gold furnace for 300 years, and then combined with some other treasures to refine red heaven pill. Once the red heaven pill was done, it would take 16 years and 9 months to refine it into a red heaven golden pill. In order to refine a scarlet firmament gold pill, it would take about 400 years, using hundreds of origin brewing pills as a primer, and supplemented with all kinds of heavenly treasures that were worth hundreds of thousands of origin brewing pills. He had about 15 or 16 of these pills in his hand. They were glistening yellow and golden, about the size of a broad bean. Because of the refining method, there was a kind of wonderful smoke, very much like the pot gas that ordinary people talked about when cooking. Li Yunxin picked one up and threw it into his mouth. While looking at the scene in the mirror, he chewed noisily. Eating this pill like this was a waste of its medicinal properties, just like the pills he ate on Cloud Mountain to replenish the demon power in his body. But now he liked the taste of this pill. When he was a human, the only things he could eat were grains and miscellaneous foods. Now that he was a demon, his steel teeth were indestructible, and he felt that his menu of food had suddenly expanded, eating. It was nothing more than the taste and texture of the food. No matter how crispy the food was, could it be as crispy as roasted pebbles? Just this one bite was probably equivalent to eating the wealth of a country. If a red heaven golden pill was given to a human emperor, that emperor would probably want to exchange the whole empire for it. When he ate such an astonishingly valuable snack, Xie was smiling in the room. So it's true. This sentence he didn't ask Pan He to answer. She seemed to already know, you are just tools that can move and talk. You don't deserve to play tricks with me. After saying this, his palm released a little spiritual power. Then he asked Pan He to absorb some of the essence brewing pill. The woman's face immediately had a healthy color. His aura had also calmed down from its weak state. She clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, Daoist Xia. Xia Xing snorted coldly, I'll ask you a second time, who is the biggest enemy of your Freemasonry in this world? When Li Yunxin, who was watching the show from the clouds, heard this sentence, his body slightly leaned forward. He seemed to be nervous. He even put down the second red heaven golden pill that he was about to put into his mouth. He already knew this woman Pan He. This woman was a little smart and ambitious. She met a good opportunity to take the position, and felt that she had a chance to advance. So she had the drive to risk her life. First she dared to look for him, then she dared to look for Xie Sheng. And she didn't see herself as a human. And as Xie Sheng said, she really treated herself as a tool. What happened tonight was proof of that. Even when this woman was on the verge of death and was badly mutilated, she still wanted to smile for Xie Sheng to see. She was extremely ruthless. She was extremely ruthless to herself and others. If she wasn't so stupid, she was actually very similar to Li Yunxin himself. Because Pan He was this kind of person. So Li Yunxin could guess what she would say. She originally wanted to tell Xie Sheng that Shinryu is the sky demon. Because they, the members of the new Freemasonry who only knew part of the truth, still thought that the so-called Great Calamity was really some invasion of the sky demon. They should also know that the origin of this child from heaven was related to the elders of Cloud Mountain. Since they were related, they should be in the same camp. And Xie Sheng asked her, who is the enemy of the Freemasonry? According to Li Yunxin's speculation, he probably wanted to use this question to indirectly confirm his own guess. This Xie Sheng was extremely smart. So he knew the strategy of asking questions. To get the answer to a question, it was best not to directly ask the question. Also, don't listen to the enemy's unnecessary details and nonsense. Because those details and nonsense might be misleading. Only ask what you want to hear, then integrate the results and compare them. This was the best way to get the truth in a situation where there was too much information. The enemy of the Freemasonry was naturally the organization that he belonged to, the organization that belonged to Art St. Qinzhao. And Pan He, this woman who wasn't afraid of death and also wanted to take the position, would not obediently surrender at this time. She would definitely want to try and achieve her goal. So she would say, it's Shinryu, Li Yunxin said softly, staring straight at Pan He. It's Shinryu, Pan He said softly without any hesitation. Ha! Li Yunxin leaned back in his chair and tossed the second jindan into his mouth. She still wanted to lure Xie Sheng, the child from heaven, to cause trouble for the Shinryu and achieve their goal. Hearing her answer, Xie Sheng was silent for a while. It was indeed the answer he wanted. The god of Shinryu was the leader of the Little Demon Protection. For him, he believed that the Little Demon Protection created by the Shinryu was the organization that he should find. And his organization was the enemy of the Freemasonry. Pan He's answer indeed supported his point of view. And for him, there was indeed a factor that Li Yunxin didn't know that made him believe in this. He asked the second question just to see if Pan He would start telling the truth, since he thought he already knew the answer. In fact, Pan He lied. But Xie Sheng believed that what Pan He said was true. This was the part that made Li Yunxin the happiest and most excited. At this time, such an interesting thing was rare. The two people with ulterior motives, because the information they had was limited, they both thought that they knew everything. They said their own lies, but in the end, it became the truth in each other's ears, and made each other even more certain of their own thoughts. Li Yunxin slapped his thigh and laughed. Although his laughter was blocked by the barrier that he cast and no one could hear it, he still felt that it was extremely amusing and carefree. Halfway through his laughter, he suddenly stopped laughing and snorted coldly. Back then, when Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia saw him being played around by all kinds of fake news, they probably laughed like this too. Those two bastards, fortunately there was nothing left of them. Li Yunxin snorted again, threw the third jindan into his mouth and chewed it fiercely. Since Xie Sheng got the answer he wanted, after a moment of silence, his expression became slightly relaxed. He circulated qi in his palm again. Pan He let out a moan. The wounds on her back and lower body began to heal slowly. But at the same time, it was extremely itchy and she couldn't help but moan a few more times. These moans seemed to arouse Xie Sheng's interest. But at least he knew that he was doing something serious now. He only reached out his other hand to Pan He's chest and fiercely pinched it a few times. As he played with it, he said, "At least you knew your place and told the truth. Let me ask you again, is there anyone else like you on this ship? Other people like you?" Li Yunxi knew that Xie Xing was referring to people like Mu Nanju and the Freemasonry. He only knew about Mu Nanju after he went to Rong City in the state of Yu. This Xie Xing should not know about it now. It was best not to tell him. So Li Yunxin's fingers moved, and he was finally ready to interrupt their conversation. But then he stopped, because someone else moved. It was Pan He's husband, Wu Jiasong, who was sitting outside Xie Xing's vault, waiting in the cold wind for a long time. At this time, he finally couldn't wait any longer. He gritted his teeth and muttered something. He suddenly stood up, turned around and was about to smash the door. But when his aggressive hand was about to touch the door, he stopped, as if he was hesitating. After hesitating for about 2 or 3 breaths, he fiercely stamped his feet. He lightly knocked a few times. In the room, Xie Xing's words were interrupted by the sound of knocking on the door. He was not in a hurry to ask. Instead, he sneered and put more force into his hand. "Ha! Your man has been waiting outside for a few hours. Do you want to call him in?" Chapter 613. Pan He was about to speak, but Xie Xing wasn't asking for her opinion. She didn't know what he was thinking. He suddenly exerted force in his palm and dissolved half of the elemental brew pill in her mouth. The wounds on Pan He's body healed quickly. It only took 2 or 3 breaths. The scabs on the surface of her body fell off. She returned to her fair, delicate and fragrant appearance a few hours ago. Seeing her like this, Xie Xing laughed repeatedly. He waved his hand to undo the restriction in the cabin and said in a low voice, "Who is it?" Wu Jiasong had been knocking outside the cabin for a while. Now that he finally heard someone's voice, he was stunned. When Xie Xing shouted, "Speak," again he hurriedly said, "My Taoist priest's room is..." Xie Xing looked at Pan He. This woman had recovered her strength. Hearing their conversation, she was about to pick up her clothes on the ground. However, her pair of jade rabbits were in Xie Xing's hands, so she didn't dare to get up and walk away. She only tried to move a little, but Xie Xing pulled her into his arms and pinched her with his fingers. He squinted his eyes evilly and waved his hand again. The cabin door opened silently. "Your wife." He squinted at Wu Jiasong, who was standing at the cabin door with his hands still in the air. "Your wife is not bad. What's the matter?" This ugly and lewd scene unfolded in front of Wu Jiasong. His wife was naked and in Taoist priest Xie's arms. Her hair was messy and her skin was flushed. Even the bed was half collapsed. There was still a certain smell in the room. How could he not know what had happened in the past few hours? Pan He wanted to lower her head and turn around. However, she couldn't move because of Xie Xing's hand. Wu Jiasong could only see her clearly. He raised his head and put on a calm expression. "What are you doing here? Go back." Wu Jiasong stared at the two of them and his expression froze. He seemed to have turned into a puppet. He could only move after 2 or 3 breaths. At first, he seemed to listen to Pan He and subconsciously took a step back. But then he stopped, widened his eyes and pointed at Xie Xing. His lips trembled. "You." Xie Xing tilted his head. "That was right. It was your wife who delivered herself to our doorstep. Why do you want to play too?" Hearing this, Wu Jiasong still said, You. After saying these 3 words, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Pan He opened her mouth as if she wanted to scream, but she swallowed it back. Xie Xing snorted in disappointment. He raised his hand and pinched Pan He's face, taking out the origin brew pill that had already become smaller. He pushed her away and said with a frown, "Don't be an eyesore here. Get him out of here." Pan He was startled. She hurriedly picked up her clothes from the ground, put them on, tied them up and ran to help Wu Jiasong up. Xie Xing said coldly, "Come back tonight." Li Yunxin watched all of this from the sky. When he saw this, he let out a soft, because when Xie Xing toyed with Pan He and now humiliated Wu Jiasong, he could understand and experience a little. However, he had never experienced Wu Jiasong's emotional state before. It was hard for him to imagine what kind of feeling it was. To him, this was a novelty. He frowned and pondered for a while, then shook his head. He thought about it. Although it was a novelty to him, it shouldn't be comfortable. It was better for him not to try it. But because he couldn't experience empathy more deeply, he didn't have too much sympathy for Wu Jiasong's experience. Instead, he understood Xie Xing better. This person was also a pervert. He had seen too many perverts in this world. First of all, he himself was one. Those demons and cultivators, from a human's point of view, were all perverts. His situation didn't need to be mentioned, it was because of physiological reasons in his previous life, and a strange experience that led to an extremely special psychological condition, which was brought to this life. Although he had already begun to strive to be a normal person in this life, there was still a long way to go to reach his goal. Otherwise, which normal person would be watching here in high spirits? Those demons and cultivators, due to their own reasons, all had incomplete emotions and were similarly strange. And this Xie Xing, when Li Yunxin first saw him, he felt that this person was also quite enigmatic. Calm, steady, smart and scheming. According to this evaluation, he really shouldn't have let Pan He into the house tonight. Even if he entered the house, he shouldn't have let Pan He into his bed. Impulsive lust would cause people to let down their guard, and they might accidentally reveal key information. But this guy was different. Not only did he have a big fight, but he also seemed to have a very heavy taste. This made Li Yunxin puzzled. He originally thought that before he came here, his identity should be relatively special, and he should have received training. Perhaps he was similar to a secret agent in his world. If he was an ordinary person because of a soul with the memories and lust of an adult, in the body of a young man in his teens, and suppressed in the deep mountains for more than 10 years. At this time, there was a beautiful woman who took the initiative to come to him, and he did have the ability and capital to do whatever he wanted. Li Yunxin wouldn't be surprised to do what he did tonight. But in a situation where he seemed to have received training, and knew that the environment around him is not very peaceful, it was really too unprofessional to first vent his lust before asking. No powerful character that Li Yunxin knew would do such a thing. There were probably two possibilities for this situation. One possibility was that this person himself had such a personality defect. But Li Yunxin knew that his body seemed to carry important information, and it was fixed to be projected here from another world. It was not a wise choice to use a carrier with such a terrible defect to carry important information. The mastermind behind the scenes who had the ability to achieve such a goal shouldn't be stupid enough to make such a mistake. The other possibility was that he seemed to have never seen a woman before. Or it could be said that the place he came from had very few opportunities to contact women, and his lust was also strongly restrained. On this point, Li Yunxin could see some clues from his first 2 rounds. Because his new body couldn't adapt well to strong stimulation, it was normal for him to be a quick shooter twice. But his jerky movements at the beginning were not normal. He seemed to have, indeed had no such experience. So he covered it up with an attitude of arrogance and indifference, and with Pan He's flattery and intentional guidance, he quickly got into the mood. Then like a child who got a new toy, he couldn't stop playing. These thoughts flashed through his mind in the blink of an eye. At this moment he remembered many things from the past, some things that he didn't find strange in the past, but now compared with Xie Xing's situation he finally found some clues. Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu sometimes talked about women. In the past he felt that he was pretending to be a child and neither of them could tell. Now he knew that both sides were acting. He was pretending to be a child and the two were pretending to be his parents. They were observing in the dark. Sometimes, they would inadvertently talk about things between men and women. It wasn't any hardcore content. It was just some questions about love. And they might have deliberately led him to express his views, in a way that would make his parents laugh. Now that he thought about it, if there was a soul hiding in this body with normal desires and normal experiences, under their guidance, he would unintentionally express some views that were normal and not strange compared with his current identity. But Li Yunxin wasn't a normal person, so he couldn't say any normal views. Now that he thought about it, if it was this Xie Xing he probably couldn't say it either. It seemed that because of this, in the eyes of Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu, his identity became more appropriate. It could be counted as a coincidence. But if he used these details as evidence, he should also draw a conclusion. His second inference about Xie Xing was correct. In the other world he came from, there were very few opportunities to interact with women. He used the idea of that world. Because he had always been faintly aware, and tonight because of Xie Xing he finally confirmed one thing. The world that Xie Xing and the elders used to belong to, it wasn't the world that he was familiar with, the world that he came from. As a result, he found the answers to many questions that had puzzled him before. Bai Yanjun once took him to a space of nothingness and said some strange things to him. He meant that if Li Yunxin was the person they were looking for, he should be able to understand what he said. But he couldn't understand, he could only perfunctorily bluff his way through. That was the first time he suspected that there was another real crown prince. Then he went to Cloud Mountain and asked Grandpa D 2 questions. But Grandpa D immediately lost interest in him and saw through his identity. Li Yunxin thought he was a smart person. He wouldn't be so stupid as to carefully prepare 2 questions, but the more he asked, the worse it would get. Now he understood that it wasn't that he was crazy. It was that Grandpa D and he didn't belong to the same world, so naturally no matter how he asked, it would get him into trouble. It was also at that time that he began to suspect that there was not only another real crown prince, but also another world. That world should also have a highly developed civilization. It might even be more developed than where he came from. In his previous life he had heard of the so-called March 18th incident. It was said that an unbelievably advanced and mysterious fleet of aircrafts had appeared in his old country. And now, did they also come from the original world where Xie Sheng and the elders were? Then what about Chen Zhao the painting saint? She had left all kinds of details in this world. It was because of those details that Li Yunxin had a preconceived notion that Chen Zhao and the elders should come from the same world as him. Then Chen Zhao, where did he come from? Apart from that, there was another crucial question. That was, why did Li Chunfeng, Shang Guanyu, and even the mastermind of Southernwood House behind them observe him for more than 10 years instead of directly asking if he was that person? This illogical situation made Li Yunxin have another bold speculation. It was indeed possible that he was someone else. This someone else didn't refer to someone like Li Yunxin who had a strange fate and ended up in the wrong place. Instead, it referred to the other forces that Southernwood House and the others had included in their plans in advance. It was possible that the person who had been sent here wasn't the real crown prince they wanted, but the impersonator, who was also very dangerous to them. This speculation was very bold. But what he knew now was far beyond the scope of reasonable. If he didn't speculate more boldly, he was afraid that he would always be led by the nose. If he looked at things again with this speculation, it seemed that all the unreasonable things were clear. For example, why did Chen Zhao and the elders of Cloud Mountain all transmigrators, but the Southernwood House force that Chen Zhao left behind had become enemies with the elders? It was possible that they weren't very friendly in the other world. And now this Xie Sheng, if he really was the real crown prince, the key information he carried should be very useful to both sides. Therefore, although this guy was wary of the Freemasonry, he wasn't as fearful as Li Yunxin had been. He should also know that he had important information and that the Freemasonry wouldn't dare to do anything to him. This could also explain why the Freemasonry would always give Li Yunxin a chance of survival despite suppressing him in every possible way. So, what important information was it? In that short instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through Li Yunxin's mind. The surrounding scene seemed to be moving in slow motion in his eyes. Everything that Xie Sheng had done tonight had a huge impact on him. It had also opened a new door for him. The countless details that had been stored in his mind finally showed signs of being sorted out. That meant, it should be related to the calamity that the Freemasonry people were talking about. The Freemasonry elders used the calamity to brush off their subordinates. This statement wasn't baseless. It was just that they had packaged the truth in a different way. The so-called calamity should be referring to something else. Perhaps the key information that Xie Sheng had could help them resolve the calamity. As for what it was, perhaps he would only have an answer when he understood this world better. When he first came here, he thought that everything was very normal. It was just that there was a different power system. Now, the more he understood, the stranger he felt. What was the so-called weak water? What was the celestial? Why did the Black Yama King die for no reason? Why were everyone, including mortals and cultivators, trapped in this vast midland? This Xie Sheng, was he the person that Mu Nanja really wanted? Xie Sheng would never have thought that after venting for more than 4 hours, Li Yunxin would understand so many questions. If he really knew, he would probably castrate himself out of regret. At this moment, Pan He had already supported Wu Jiasong. Wu Jiasong didn't refuse and became like a puppet, allowing her to manipulate him. It was as if the mouthful of blood he had just spat out had spat out a lot of things. The two of them walked out. Pan He's expression was the same as usual, as if nothing had happened. Wu Jiasong didn't say a word. Only when they got down from the deck and walked to the side of the ship did the man stop. He slowly withdrew his hand from Pan He's arm and looked at her with a dull gaze. He seemed to be waiting for her to explain. Pan He frowned and looked around. The night was dark and the sea was foggy. "I'm cold," she said. "Let's go back and talk." But Wu Jiasong didn't move. The man who cared for Pan He so much was gone. Pan He sighed. "All right." Chapter 6:14. After saying this, she was silent for a while and began to slowly tie her clothes again. Wu Jiasong's gaze fell on her right hand. It had recovered. In fact, Pan He only wore a robe. She did not have time to wear the rest of her clothes and left them in Xie Xing's room. The only thing she needed to tie was the belt of the robe. Usually she only needed to move her fingers to tie these two small belts. However, at this time she pulled and pulled but couldn't tie it properly. He seemed to be thinking about something and hesitating about something. The fog on the sea was heavy. The two of them were silent for a while. Their hair, eyelashes, and beards were covered with a layer of water droplets. After a long time, Pan He sighed again and finally said, "Now, I will tell you the truth. I have another identity that you have never known. You shouldn't have seen what happened tonight. But even if you saw it, there is nothing you can do. He and I did not know each other before. But I need to get something from him." Speaking of this, Pan He raised her hand and touched Wu Jiasong's face. The man moved slightly as if he wanted to avoid it. However, his eyes were dull like a puppet. In the end he didn't move. So Pan He's fingers brushed Wu Jiasong's face like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. Then she lowered her hand to fix his collar and whispered, "Thank you for taking care of me all these years. I owe you. When we reach the East Sea chain you should get off the boat. I have to continue to the east. What I want to do, you will die if you get involved." After saying this, Wu Jiasong still didn't speak. Pan He waited for a while, then sighed for the third time and was about to turn away. But she heard him whisper, "Did you find him or did he force you?" Pan He was stunned he actually asked this. She shook her head. "Now that things have come to this, is it him or you?" Wu Jiasong interrupted her. Pan He was silent for a while. "It's me." So Wu Jiasong's face slowly became lively as if the frost was thawing. He took a step back as if he wanted to see Pan He's whole body. "Why don't I know? Of course, I know you have another identity. So I know you have martial arts skills. When I bought you, you didn't explain your background clearly. I thought you were a Jianghu heroine." At this point she smiled sadly. "It's my fault for reading too many romance novels. I even thought of stories for you." He thought to himself, "Perhaps you're a hero who offended your enemies and wanted to live in seclusion. Then you came to me. Since I like this story, I never asked you. I just thought that I have a lot of friends. If you have a calamity, I can also resolve it for you." As he said this in a low voice, his brows slowly furrowed. Why didn't I think about it? How could there be a heroine in a legendary novel? A woman walking in the pugilistic world, showing her face in public, mingling with a group of bandits, robbers, and people who fight fiercely and bravely. What kind of thing can she be? Ha! There are so many heroines like you. Those who didn't produce anything and didn't make any money, put it nicely, were wandering the Jianghu, but in fact, as long as they covered their faces, they were bandits who robbed others. There was no more money to rob. Once she opened her legs, she would become a prostitute. If she didn't do well, she would marry a bandit or go to a remote place to be a foreign woman. If she did well, she would have some reputation and become a heroine, but it's just, those girls in the brothel use their talent and beauty as a gimmick. You guys use your heroism as a gimmick? Marry someone like me, Jiasong, enough. Enough. When Wu Jiasong said these words, his tone became more and more rapid, and his voice became louder and louder. But Pan He was very calm. Seeing his face turned red again, she interrupted him, "I've been with you for so many years. You know I don't have time to do those things. Don't be angry. You just vomited blood. You're not in good health." Wu Jiasong suddenly shouted loudly, "I don't need your hypocrisy." His cry was heard by all the sailors on night watch. So they came over to see. Lu Baishui couldn't hide in the shadow and pretend nothing had happened. Therefore, Li Yunxin saw him jump down from the second floor with a beautiful movement. He pretended that he had just walked over, stuck his head out from afar, and shouted in a low voice, "Who's there? What's going on?" While talking, he walked over slowly. Li Yunxin felt that Lu Baishui didn't really want to get involved, so he was dawdling. This guy was really smart. He knew where the water was deep and where the water was shallow. His name had the word water in it. A famous person once said, "A small temple is full of demons and a shallow water is full of turtles." Now, he felt that this sentence was very true. There were only 200 people, but they had a lot of power. He regretted making this trip at this time. Wu Jiasong sneered, looked at Pan He and said loudly, "Good. Someone is coming." Then he looked at Lu Baishui. "What's going on? You want to know what's going on? Okay, let me tell you." His voice became louder and louder. At this moment, Xie Xing was still in the cabin. He closed the door, sat cross-legged on the side of the wooden bed that didn't collapse, and continued to cultivate as if nothing had happened. This guy must have entered the sage mode to vent his anger. It was a good time to suppress his inner demons and break through the realm. This method was the same as those cultivators who went on a killing spree in the mortal world, passed a fake tribulation, and then continued to cultivate. Li Yunxin sighed. He thought that almost all the bad guys in the world learned without a teacher when they did bad things. Only good people would work hard to learn. He had learned from Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu for more than 10 years, he could be considered a good person. But when Wu Jiasong shouted like that, Pan He looked at him pleadingly and whispered, "Jiasong, don't." Wu Jiasong also stared at her. His eyes were full of anger. But, looking at her, he didn't know why, but he suddenly felt that the anger in his heart was gone. It was still burning and it didn't go out. But now that he was weak and powerless from the burning, he suddenly didn't want to say a single word. He stared at her for a while, then turned his head and said loudly, "Nothing. Nothing. Me," he bit his words, "something is wrong with this woman." Nothing. Lu Baishui wanted him to say nothing. Hearing this, he coughed. "Ah, that's good. The wind is strong on the sea, please go back to the cabin. Let's go back." So saying, he beckoned to the sailors on night watch who were walking over and walked away himself. But Li Yunxin could see clearly that Master Lu didn't really leave. He went to another place to hide from the wind and continued to listen. But the wind was strong and he was far away, so he didn't know if he could hear clearly. This guy was also a worrywart. Thus, the man and the woman returned to their own world. Wu Jiasong looked at Pan He and sneered, "You told me not to. You know this kind of thing is not to be said." Pan He shook her head. "Jiasong," Wu Jiasong continued to sneer, "since you know shame you still dare to do it. All these years you..." Pan He interrupted him. "Jiasong, I don't want to kill you." "You don't want to?" Wu Jiasong was stunned. "What?" Pan He shook her head gently. She wrapped her robe and squinted at the fog on the sea. "You don't know who I am. You are not afraid of Jianghu people and you look down on heroes. Well then let me ask you, are you afraid of cultivators?" Wu Jiasong continued to be stunned. "Cultivators? I work for those cultivators. We can be considered to be their lackeys. But it's not an ordinary Jianghu gang. Jianghu gangs work for their own selfish interests. But what we want to do is related to the world." When Pan He said this, her voice was light and calm, in sharp contrast with the man in front of her. She looked back at him. "What I just did is hard for any ordinary person to accept, I know. But I'm not an ordinary person. Don't ask me what I want to do. If you know this, leave quickly." Her calm tone and solemn words finally made Wu Jiasong slowly calm down. There was still terrible anger, resentment, and grievance in his heart. However, he was not an impulsive teenager and he had some understanding of Pan He. Therefore he knew what she said might be true. He stared at her in confusion. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I don't understand." He raised his hand and pointed to the distance as if he was pointing to their home on land and asked her, "Am I not good to you? Do we lack money? Why do you still want to do these things?" Pan He finally smiled sadly. "You are good to me. We don't lack money. But before you bought me I was already doing these things. If I could choose, how would I end up like this?" Wu Jiasong was stunned. Then he suddenly took 2 steps forward and held Pan He in his arms. In a low and quick voice as if he was afraid that someone would hear, he said, That's good. I forgive you. You can choose now and don't do those things anymore, okay? Let's get off the ship when we reach the East Sea chain, okay?" Pan He did not break free. Her face was pressed against Wu Jiasong's chest, but she was still very calm. Her voice was also very calm, very cold. "Jiasong, you can't choose. Go." His body froze. The two of them hugged like this in the sea breeze for a while, and Pan He slowly broke free. Wu Jiasong was stunned. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "What happened to make you like this? Who is that Taoist priest? If you want me to go, you should at least let me know the reason." Pan He did not say anything and turned to leave. Wu Jiasong grabbed her hand, holding it very tightly. But Pan He also turned her wrist, and with a little force she caught his hand and threw it to the side. Wu Jiasong did not give up and continued to grab her. She moved sideways to avoid, but Wu Jiasong hugged her waist. "If you don't tell me I won't go. I, Wu Jiasong, have always been a person who knows what is right and wrong. This kind of thing happened and you ask me not to know. Then just kill me here." Pan He stopped, her face was still very calm. But suddenly 2 lines of tears rolled down as if the tears were dripped on her face by someone else, and not her own tears. "Why do you have to do this? Even if you know, what can you do?" But Wu Jiasong did not see her tears and only said with hatred, "I don't care." Pan He turned her back to him and said, "Okay. Then I will tell you so that you can leave clearly. I am a member of the Freemasons. I am the person in charge of the Eastern Sea country of the Freemasons. That Wuxia has a great secret, an even more frightening ability. I went to find him to tell him these things and tell him to go to the Dragon Island. If I do this, I will have a great merit. Maybe I can get promoted and I won't have to do things like this anymore. If we go to the east, we will encounter all kinds of demons and cultivators. Every one of them is very powerful. I can only rely on Wuxia to protect me, save my life, and live to accomplish those things. He is a human after all, he has desires. Because of my body, he will casually pull me for a while. I know I am not smart, but I have a strong will. Right now, my body can still be used. After a few more years, I will become old and weak and I won't even be able to use this body. If I still stay in this position, I will die a terrible death sooner or later. I am grateful to you for taking care of me for so many years and letting me live a good life. So I feel sorry for you and want to ask you to leave. But you, when she said this, tears rolled down her face more quickly. However, his hands, which were hanging by his sides, suddenly tightened. But you, why do you have to ask, why do you want me to kill you? As soon as she said this, she suddenly slammed her palms backwards. How could Wu Jiasong expect her to kill him like this? When he heard Pan He's words, the hands that were originally hugging her in a fit of pique slowly loosened, as if he couldn't bear to do it. Then he took the two palms solidly. With a bang he was sent flying and fell 2 or 3 steps away. He landed on the deck and wanted to get up. But he only tilted his head to look at Pan He, and then spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Pan He stood there for a while, then raised her hand to wipe her face and slowly turned around. At this time her tears were gone, and her face was as calm as water. She walked 3 steps to Wu Jiasong and without hesitation, raised her hand again and was about to strike his head. But at this time, she heard someone say, "If you hit him he will really die. It doesn't matter if he dies." These 3 sentences made Pan He's body suddenly tense up, and she immediately retreated 2 steps, retracting her palms in front of her. Then she saw that there was a man sitting on the ship's railing, dressed in white, looking at her with interest as if he was watching a play. In the future, when you think about the past, you will probably find that no one treated you as well as he did. Won't you regret it to death? After saying this, he thought about it again. Then he repeated with certainty, "Yes, that's what happened." Pan He frowned. The man sitting on the ship's railing looked like a middle-aged man. He had a beard, but it wasn't long, and it was neatly trimmed on his chin, which made him look somewhat rough and refined. He could be considered handsome. If there were no crow's feet at the corner of his eyes, he could even be considered handsome. His figure was between burly and thin, and it was the kind of middle-aged man who was sturdy but not fat. The most special thing about him was his eyes. The color of his pupils was very light. It was light blue. There was a strange feeling. Pan He had never seen this person on the ship. Chapter 6:15. She subconsciously turned her head to look at the ship's deck. But there was no reaction from Xie Xing, as if he did not notice the existence of this person. So she slowly took a step back and asked cautiously, "Who are you?" She wanted to ask, "Who are you?" or "What are you?" On such a night, such a man appeared. He looked like a typical person from the Central Plains, but he had blue eyes. He was obviously not a human. Pan He faintly felt that she had experienced the power of an inhuman. But just like the thought that flashed in her mind when she saw Xie Xing, she still could not remember when she had that kind of experience. But the man did not answer her. He just shook his head slightly and continued with interest, "You are a strange woman. I saw you crying. On the one hand you are reluctant to let him go, but on the other hand you want to kill him. Are all women in the world like you, saying one thing and doing another?" Pan He frowned, not knowing how to answer him. It was fine if he was a human. But if he was a demon, it was said that demons were eccentric. Like this man in front of her, he might be asking politely now, but he might show his fangs the next moment. And from his words, it seemed that he had been hurt by a woman and had a grudge against her. I had no choice. She thought about it again and again, but she could not find a way out, so she said in a low voice, "I will repay him by doing anything in my next life." Next life. The man snorted as if he did not care about her answer. "Only mortals like you believe in the next life." After saying this, he finally jumped down from the side of the ship. And at this time, Pan He also noticed a detail. When he landed, his left foot was a little lame, and his brows were slightly wrinkled. It seemed that he was injured recently. As soon as he landed, he looked behind Pan He. He said loudly, "Brother Lu, come out and meet me." At this time, Li Yunxin straightened his body in the clouds. There were only 3 golden beans left in his hand. He did not eat any more, turned his palm over and withdrew it. After a slight hesitation, he stood up again. So the chair under him disappeared. Then he stared at the new person for a while, frowning slightly. In his eyes, this fellow was also immortal. This meant that he couldn't see through his cultivation level. Perhaps he was only slightly weaker than him, or on par with him, or stronger than him. The third possibility was extremely low. In terms of individual strength, the existence of Long Sun, who was stronger than Shi Yi's mysterious realm, could be considered to be as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He couldn't see the person's face clearly. In fact, if one were to look at him from 10 steps away, they would only be able to see a translucent, faintly glowing silhouette, just like Li Yunxin. This was some kind of brilliant invisibility technique that could hide one's spirit, energy, and spirit. However, Li Yunxin could sense the changes in the spiritual energy in the sea. Although the qi of heaven and earth was in chaos now, a powerful person would still cause slight disturbances when he or she passed by. It was hard to tell by himself, but now he had too many treasures in his hands. With the help of a Dharma treasure, he could see everything clearly. Just like when he saw the Lord Shinryu in the painting on his fan, he could see it now. This person's qi was inextricably linked with the qi of heaven and earth, very similar to the appearance of the Lord Shinryu in the city of Wei. At that time, when the city of Wei was burned, he had already taken over. The Lord Shinryu came from the sky, and on his fan, there was a painting drawn with the power of millions of spirits, faithfully projecting the mountains and rivers near the city of Wei into the painting. The real qi of heaven and earth could only be seen from the painting, and some other things could be seen. From this, he found that the Lord Shinryu had a golden core. Countless rays of golden light spread out from the core in all directions, almost forming a close connection with the mountains, rivers, and plants in the painting. It seems to have fused with nature and the spiritual qi of this world. It was an inseparable part of the background of this world. The scene at that time gave Li Yunxin a great shock. From what he knew, it seemed that if he wanted to destroy the Lord Shinryu, he had to destroy the world first. She was bound to the world. After that, he naturally went to see the Dragon Son and also himself. He wanted to see if the Dragon Son, who was assigned to various places by the Lord Shinryu, had a similar performance, but it didn't exist. He used to think that this kind of situation only appeared on the Supreme Dragon God, but now, he found that this uninvited guest also had it on him. In Li Yunxin's eyes, he was just a silhouette. But if he looked carefully at the Dharma treasure in his hand, he would see that there were countless extremely thin, extremely faint rays of light, connected with the sea and the world. The Dharma treasure was, after all, not as detailed as the Dharma treasure that he drew himself. But he also knew, this person's situation was the same as the Lord Shinryu. He was the world and the world was him, then he should be. Li Yunxin's face turned ugly. When he was on land, Lu Baishui told him about the rumors along the coast. He said that the Dragon King inland were all inferior Dragon King, and the Dragon King of the sea, the ocean was more than 10 times larger than the inland, and the number of living creatures in the ocean was more than 1,000,000 times larger than the inland, was the true Dragon King. At that time, Li Yunxin only smiled. After the Battle of Cloud Mountain, the demons of the world followed Dragon Sun's lead. When did they hear about the Dragon King of the sea? Even if the demons lived deep in the mountains and were ignorant, and the people and demons of this era had no interest in the sea. But these Dragon Sun were created from the dragon soul of the Shinryu. There were already 9 of them, how could there be another 9? But now he saw that this person was similar to the Shinryu. This is the East Sea Dragon King that Lu Baishui mentioned. Oh. He had already been a fake crown prince. If he found out that the dragon body that he had worked so hard to get was actually a fake Dragon King, he would probably explode. At this time he heard this uninvited guest call out to Lu Baishui. When Lu Baishui hid himself, he could only hide from Pan He and Xie Xing. Now that this person appeared on the ship, he could see through him at a glance. From his tone, it seemed that he was familiar with Lu Baishui. Li Yunxin frowned and looked at Lu Baishui's figure on the ship, his face slightly dark. When that person spoke, only Pan He, Lu Baishui and Wu Jiasong could hear him, and the rest of the people on the ship were isolated. Now that he was standing on the cloud, he could only see. This person seemed to be equally powerful. Li Yunxin didn't know if this person knew who he was, but he didn't want to expose himself. But Lu Baishui knew. Previously, when Xie Xing asked him, he didn't say anything. Now, from the tone of this person, it seemed that they were old acquaintances. Li Yunxin didn't know if this person would say anything this time. So his eyes became colder and he saw Lu Baishui come out of his hiding place. Chapter 6:16. But Lu Baishui's expression was a bit strange. As if he recognized this person but didn't expect to see him here. Thus, he was somewhat puzzled and his footsteps were slightly hesitant. Seeing him like this, the man laughed again. "Brother Lu, don't you recognize me?" Lu Baishui frowned and walked another 10 steps. When he could see the man's face clearly, he said, "Mr. Shueiyue, why are you here?" Mr. Shueiyue put his hands behind his back and sighed. "I heard that it's not peaceful here. I was afraid that something would happen to you, so I came to have a look. I didn't expect to see such a good show. Brother Lu, is there anyone on this ship that is giving you a hard time?" Lu Baishui walked forward a few steps and stopped. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at this Mr. Shueiyue for a while and said, "When we met, you said you were a hermit from Hun Sea. Because your ancestors were tired of the conflicts on the land, they hid in the East Sea. But now..." Mr. Shueiyue was silent for a while and looked around. "Brother Lu, when I became friends with you, I said that I didn't remember how long I had lived. You are a smart person, don't you know that I am not a human but a god? Why are you asking me this again today?" He smiled. "It seems that I came to the right place. Is it because someone on this ship is threatening you and you don't dare to tell the truth?" Lu Baishui glanced at the deck. Mr. Shueiyue smiled and shook his head. "Brother Lu, do you want to say it's him?" "I don't think so. It's just a young Taoist. There are many of them on the land. Such a person wouldn't give you a hard time. I think it's someone else." Then he said loudly, "Friends on the ship, why don't you come out and greet me? My friends are here, but you also have friends on my ship." Hearing this, Lu Baishui was surprised. Then he frowned. "Mr. Shueiyue, are you working for the East Sea Dragon King?" Mr. Shueiyue had known him for about 10 years. But the relationship between humans and gods was different from the relationship between mortals. In the past 10 years they had only met 4 or 5 times. Each time was a long time for Lu Baishui. But for Mr. Shueiyue it was like yesterday. Lu Baishui was indeed a smart person. How could he not know that Shueiyue was not a human? But when he was dealing with the demons on land, he already knew that if a demon disguised as a mortal and came into contact with humans, it was best not to expose him. If they understood each other, they could be friends. If he made it clear, most of the fiendish demons would find it boring, and some would even turn hostile. But now Shueiyue had said. And now Shueiyue suddenly appeared on the ship and said such words. Thinking back to the things he had done when the two of them were acquainted, although he was a mortal and did not know much about the inside story of Li Yunxing's trip, he gradually figured out the truth in his mind after hearing the words of goddess Penglai who possessed Li Si in Whitewater Town and seeing a lot on the boat. Only now did she realize that when Shueiyue Mr. said, "You also have friends at my place," perhaps she was referring to that Shangguanyu. This inhuman friend of his was probably also a sea demon working for the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. But disregarding all other factors, just one thing. If the person Shueiyue Mr. was referring to was really the mother of his equally mysterious brother Li, Lu Baishui himself did not like this kind of method. Maybe because he had never enjoyed the love of a father and a mother, he didn't like it. Therefore when he said this, Shueiyue's pair of light blue eyes slightly brightened. The smile on her face also gradually faded. He looked at Lu Baishui and said, "Oh? Brother Lu, you are not being threatened. You made a new friend and forgot about me?" There was fog on the sea. After Shueiyue appeared, the fog became thicker. As soon as he said this, the thick fog suddenly rolled up, and waves rose on the surface of the sea. That was not an ordinary wave. Lu Baishui first felt his feet sink. It was as if his body suddenly became heavy, pressing on the deck. Then he realized that he was not pressing on the deck, but the deck was pushing against his feet. The whole ship was suddenly lifted up. People always used the phrase "a drop in the ocean" to describe a ship sailing on the sea. At this time, this phrase became appropriate. It was as if the ship broke through the fog. Lu Baishui suddenly saw a sea of clouds. However, this sea of clouds was the fog that shrouded the surface of the sea. A gigantic wave of unknown height lifted the Tao high into the sky, but it was not a wave as steep as a lone peak when General Fubo appeared, but a wave as gentle as a mountain. This meant that this wave was hundreds of feet high and how wide it was. But looking further away, there were still countless waves rising and falling on the vast sea fog. It was as if the East Sea was originally just a basin of water, and the waves were just gentle ripples caused by a gentle breeze on the surface of the sea. But now there was a pair of giant hands in the water, stirring it violently. Even a person like Lu Baishui couldn't stand steadily after feeling the huge force from the soles of his feet, and swayed left and right 2 or 3 steps before regaining his footing. The people in the cabin were all awakened, and didn't know what was going on. But when he adjusted his breath and was about to speak again, suddenly he felt the momentum of the ship stop, the waves above the sea of clouds in the distance and even the waves below the ship, suddenly disappeared. He was shocked and knew that the huge waves had thrown the ship to the apex, and the momentum had decreased. The waves retreated but the ship was still rising. At this time the ship was already some distance from the sea. He only had time to reach out to the side of the ship, and then he felt all the internal organs in his body being thrown up, and he couldn't stand on anything. He was falling in the air and then there was a loud bang and the seawater splashed on the deck. He hit the ship hard as if he had fallen from a height of several feet. A terrible groan came from the hull of the ship. Lu Baishui didn't know if the keel could withstand such an impact. If it couldn't, the lives of all the people on the ship would be gone. He looked to the side and his heart sank. He saw a broken plank and a mainmast on the raging waves. There was fog on the sea and he couldn't see where the Haitsong was. But according to the wave just now, the Haitsong was on the top of the wave and the Haitsong was on the slope. Faced with such a terrifying wave, the Haitsong had most likely capsized. At this time, the roar of the waves was like thunder in the sky, covering the screams of the people on the ship. Xie Xing finally felt something was wrong, and he poked his head out of the cabin. But Mr. Shuiwei, who was standing steadily, snapped his fingers, and the cabin door closed with a bang, knocking him back. It was strange, although there were loud noises around him, he could hear everything clearly within 10 steps of him. At this time, Lu Baishui stood up from the ground, and saw Pan He pulling Wu Jiasong's unconscious body to the side of the ship. Mr. Shuiwei smiled coldly, "Brother Lu. If you were threatened because you were afraid of that person's supernatural power, let's see if he dares to come out today." Then he looked around and shouted, "Friends on land, why don't you show yourself?" At this time the sea wind was roaring and the waves were roaring. The Haitsong was like a small boat in the wind, and it could capsize at any time. Mr. Shuiwei still had a faint smile on his face, but it was getting colder, and the light on his body was getting brighter. He looked more and more like a powerful god of the sea. Every move he made could change the sea and the sky. Lu Baishui knew the situation was not good. He wasn't afraid of death. But there were still many brothers on the ship. If so many people had died because of his promise and friendship to someone else, what would they have done to deserve it? So he steadied himself in the storm and called out loudly, "Mr. Shuiwei, you and I have been friends for 10 years. Are you really going to bury all of us tonight?" Mr. Shuiwei smiled slightly. "That depends on whether that friend of yours is willing to show up and settle the accounts." Lu Baishui was stunned. Accounts? But when he said this he suddenly found that the world suddenly became quiet. It was as if the raging waves and raging winds of the world were just a background. Now, just after he said this word, someone suddenly removed the background and replaced it with another one. In the blink of an eye, the thick fog on the surface of the sea dissipated completely, revealing a bright moon on the horizon. The waves also disappeared. Not only did they disappear, but the sea was as calm as a mirror, without a trace of a wave, like a pool of stagnant water. But the most amazing thing was, Lu Baishui could still feel the wind blowing on his face. The sails were still swollen and the ship was still moving quickly. Mr. Shuiwei was stunned. It seemed that he was also surprised by such a drastic change. He abruptly looked around but he didn't see or sense anything. As for Lu Baishui, he opened his eyes wide in disbelief, not knowing what to think or say. He knew that Li Yunxin was not an ordinary person. He also knew that Li Yunxin had some magical powers. But he didn't know that his magical powers were so powerful. It was so powerful that it could suppress the raging waves of the sea in an instant. Mr. Shuiwei didn't seem to be the Mr. Shuiwei he knew. Li Yunxin was also not the Li Yunxin he knew. Then he heard a clear voice coming from the sky. "Brother Lu, your Mr. Shuiwei is not working for the Dragon King of the East Sea. In my opinion, he is the Dragon King of the East Sea." Lu Baishui followed the voice and looked up. He saw that Li Yunxin had already reverted to her original handsome appearance. She stepped on the void and walked down from the sky. There was a hazy light on his body, just like the light on Mr. Shuiwei's body, which made him look like a dream, like a god. Chapter 617. Lu Baishui didn't know if it was an illusion, but with every step he took, he felt his body shake slightly. It was as if there was an invisible giant foot following his steps, stepping on the surface of the sea again and again, causing the raging waves to be unable to stir even half a bit. Lu Baishui realized, this was a real fight between immortals and it was not something he could participate in. With great shock he slowly retreated to the side. He really didn't know what to say or do. 10 days ago he was drinking and having fun with him in the inn, but now he was like a god. Under such circumstances, if a mortal didn't immediately kneel down and worship him, it would be a miracle. Mr. Shueiyue didn't stop him. In fact, although this master of the sea still had a smile on his face, his eyebrows were already furrowed imperceptibly. The clear light on his body was jumping, like the internal energy of a martial arts master. If the divine power of a god could be calculated using internal energy, then in Lu Baishui's view, this Mr. Shueiyue seemed to have mobilized all the divine power in his body to fight against some kind of power. But he didn't seem to gain any advantage and was even at a slight disadvantage. When Li Yunxin finally walked to the deck, the clear light on Mr. Shueiyue's body had already become as bright as a flame. You want to settle accounts with me? Li Yunxin raised his hand and pressed down. It seemed to be a very casual movement, but also like he was brushing away something. Tell me what accounts? There was a crisp cracking sound. Cracks appeared on the deck. And the center of those radial cracks was right under Mr. Shueiyue's feet. He stopped smiling and his expression became a little strange. But Lu Baishue couldn't tell what was strange. He only felt that his chest was stuffy. Before, when Mr. Shueiyue was angry, he raised incredible waves on the surface of the sea, and the momentum was extremely terrifying. But now, those waves were calmed by Li Yunxin and became extremely quiet. And now this silence had reached a certain extreme. It was as if the entire sea was imprisoned and was getting tighter and tighter. The sea breeze stopped, and the surface of the sea was like a mirror. Now even the air was horribly stuffy. Even with Lu Baishui's cultivation, he had to use a bit of effort to open his mouth to breathe. What was even stranger was that in his ears, he began to hear the sound of his own blood flowing and his heartbeat. When he realized this, he was shocked. He realized that there was no sound at all, other than the sound of Li Yunxin and Shueyu talking and the sound of the deck breaking. His voice was suppressed by some kind of power. What kind of terrifying and mystical power was this? Lu Baishue gasped. He started to think about the days he spent with Li Yunxin. What kind of person was he with? Mr. Shueiyue also seemed to be straining. But he was still much better than Lu Baishue. He took a step forward. There were ripples on the surface of the sea, and the air seemed to relax a little. But this step was like fanning the air in a closed room. After taking a breather for a while, he suppressed it again, and with a buzzing sound, the entire ship sank again. It was just that he had sunk because he had been thrown onto the waves. Now that he was sinking, it was like loose soil being compacted. The surface of the sea was pressed down. As a result, even more fine cracks appeared under his feet, and his expression became increasingly strange. Even his voice changed as if his entire body was suffocating in the water. Your friend, these days he has swallowed the demon generals under my command, the whale sharks of the sea. It wasn't easy for him to attain the Tao, but he killed nearly 100 of them. Today he fought with me, but he was so stubborn. He even dared to hurt me. Now he has been captured and imprisoned by me. How do you want to settle this debt with the East Sea tribe? His words were smooth, but his voice became more and more dull. By the last few words, his voice was so low that it was unclear. At this time, Lu Baishue realized why Mr. Shueiyue's expression was strange. His face and his body seemed to be melting. His eyebrows, eyes, nose, and mouth slowly drooped. As he spoke, he walked towards Li Yunxin. But with every step he took, his body sank a little. When he finished speaking, he was like a melting sugar doll. Even his legs were bent. Li Yunxin only sneered, "So you are here to interrogate me? What a coincidence. I also have something to ask you." East Sea Dragon King. With every word Li Yunxin said, the person in front of him became more distorted and abstract. "Is Shangguanyu with you?" The visitor's body suddenly froze. Although his face had already melted into a ball, one could still see the surprise on his face. "You," but he couldn't say anything more. His body finally couldn't bear the terrible pressure, and with a boom he turned into countless flowing lights. Those flowing lights should have dissipated, but at the moment of disintegration, an iron chain suddenly appeared in Li Yunxin's palm. He swung it at the flowing lights and locked them all. Lu Baishue was shocked. "Brother Li?" Li Yunxin didn't look at him. He turned his left hand again and took out a piece of magic paper. He wiped it on the iron chain. It seemed that all the light spots on the chain were wiped into the paper. Then he glanced at Lu Baishue and said lazily, Brother Lu, are you worried? Don't worry, it's just the incarnation of the East Sea Dragon King. It's just that he probably didn't expect that his incarnation wouldn't be able to leave after coming here. He must be beating his chest and stamping his feet in Mao Peng Lai, and is so angry that he wants to beat someone up. Saying this, he squinted at Lu Baishui. Maybe he also hates you. I guess you can't be friends anymore. Ah. He shook his head and sighed. What a fragile friendship. Lu Baishui was stunned. I didn't mean. Li Yunxin waved his hand and drawled, well, Brother Lu, I am not a narrow-minded person. If you can't be friends with him, you can be friends with me. You and I are friends, tell me about it. How did you get to know this Mr. Shueiyue? What does he ask you to do? Lu Baishui was stunned. Only then did he realize that the sea had started to ripple again. The sound of the wind could be heard, and his breathing was no longer suppressed. But after hearing Li Yunxin's words, he felt more depressed. He looked at Li Yunxin for a while without fear and then slowly stepped back. Brother Li, are you going to interrogate me? Li Yunxin laughed. Interrogate? Brother Lu, your friend from the East Sea sang the height song. He almost fed you guys to the fish. But I turned the tide, and saved you guys. Now I am interrogating the person who wanted to kill you 2 ships. How can it be called an interrogation? Or Brother Lu has some secrets that you can't tell me? After saying this, the smile on Li Yunxin's face disappeared. He looked at Lu Baishui coldly for a while. But Lu Baishui heaved a sigh and looked at him seriously. I only knew he was Mr. Shueiyue. I didn't know he was the Dragon King of the East Sea. And I didn't know Ling Xi was with him. Just like you were Lu Hao Baishui before. Li Yunxin sneered, not the Sea King Lu Fei? Brother Li used to be a Jianghu hero, but then you became a cultivator. And then you became a godlike figure today. Lu Baishui sighed, are we still going to bicker like this? Okay. No bickering. Then tell me, how many things are you hiding from me? Li Yunxin sneered. He waved his hand and a table suddenly appeared in front of him. He spread the magic paper on the table, and a magic brush appeared in his hand. Now the sky is clear and the moon is bright. Brother Lu, take your time and I will listen to you. Then I will finish this painting, it will be a wonderful thing. Lu Baishui's eyes subconsciously fell on the table in front of Li Yunxin. After seeing the miraculous scene just now, he was not too surprised to see Li Yunxin make a table out of thin air. But when he looked at the paper again, he couldn't help but be surprised. There was a painting on the paper. The painting was simple, it was the sea. It was drawn in a way that Lu Baishui had never seen before. It seemed to be just a few strokes with a brush dipped in color. But when Lu Baishui looked at it, he felt that the paper was full of raging waves. It was even more frightening than when the towel was thrown into the sky by a huge wave. It was as if the vast sea that they lived in was really sealed in the paper by a few strokes, and it would violently overflow at any time. Seeing the black light and raging waves with their own eyes didn't make people afraid. That was because even the terrifying waves were still within reason, just more violent and intense. But the scene now was something that no mortal had ever experienced, not to mention mortals. Even in the cultivation world in the past 1,000 years, also, no one would ever witness a profound realm Taoist painting a spirit map that seemed to be able to seal the qi of the entire world into it. If someone who knew a little about this, such as Xian Shiliu, saw what Li Yunxin did, he would be 10,000 times more surprised than Lu Baishui. In the past, when the qi of the world was not chaotic, it was extremely difficult to draw such a vast world into a painting. Even a profound painting Taoist in the mysterious realm might not be able to do it. Not to mention that the qi of the world had been messed up by Li Yunxin today. How could he do it? Of course Lu Baishui didn't know any of this. But it didn't stop this hero of the sea who didn't show any fear even when the 2 big monsters were fighting. He gasped and took 3 steps back before he could stabilize himself. It was just that he glanced at it. He felt as if an endless amount of seawater was pressing down on him, and he was at the bottom of the sea thousands of meters, tens of thousands of meters deep. It was dark and gloomy, and he could be trapped there forever at any time, unable to escape. He gasped for breath. It was as if he had survived a disaster, just because of that glance. Seeing him like this, Li Yunxin smiled slightly. Humph. Brother Lu, it's rare for you to have a firm mind. It's lucky that mortals dare to look at my spiritual map and don't think that they are stupid. Chapter 618. Lu Baishui stared blankly. He seemed to be scared out of his wits. He had never seen anything like this even though he had traveled all over the world. He couldn't care less about what Li Yunxin had said. He gasped and asked, "What is this?" While asking, he couldn't help but look at it. But as soon as he looked at the edge of the table, the palpitation overwhelmed him again, forcing him to look away. Li Yunxin didn't look at him. He was just writing. Every stroke of the brush was extremely fast. It was as if he was in the mood to paint an uninhibited freehand painting. But from the point of view of the people in this world, his paintings did not look very brilliant. A lot of colors and lines were piled together in a somewhat messy and disorderly manner. He was painting the spiritual painting just like he did in the city of Wei. When he was in the city of Wei, he temporarily raised his cultivation to the profound realm with the power of millions of ghosts and absorbed the earthly chi of the nearby mountains and rivers into his painting. Now that he was in the profound realm, he planned to try again. This kind of attempt was not a relaxing experience. For example, no matter how knowledgeable a person was, he wouldn't be willing to take a troublesome exam. There were two reasons why Li Yunxin was doing this. First, he found that the Dragon King of the East Sea seemed to have a close connection with this world. When one reached the profound realm in painting, he could also seal the spiritual chi of heaven and earth into his painting, forming a mysterious relationship with the real world. For example, there were waves in his painting now. Then, even if he was thousands of miles away, as long as he touched the spiritual chi in the painting, he could really raise earth-shaking waves on this vast ocean. Theoretically speaking, if one's cultivation in the art of painting was high enough, so high that it far surpassed the grand supreme realm, one could even make the entire ocean, the entire world, vanish without a trace with just one stroke on the painting. But in fact, this only existed in one's imagination. For example, in the world he came from, if a person or an object ran fast enough, they could see what they looked like when they were just running. But if they couldn't surpass the speed of light, this kind of theoretical possibility based on the unified system would never be possible. But even so, there were still many things that could be done. Over the past few days, Hai Tian and the Dragon King of the East Sea had a close relationship. Therefore, doing something to this vast ocean was equivalent to doing something to the Dragon King of the East Sea. This was easy to say but difficult to do. Because if you really want to draw a person into a painting, you have to understand him very well. This understanding did not mean knowing his emotions, personality, and habits, but a deep understanding of his physiology. She knew how the spiritual aura in his body worked in every minute detail of his body. Only by clarifying all of this and then using the spiritual energy in his body as a primer, could he retain some kind of connection with him in the painting. This matter had to be explained clearly and was extremely complicated. It could be considered a profound technique in the painting path that was half taught verbally and half understood through understanding. Li Yunxin had tasted the sweetness in the city of Wei, and now he wanted to try again. However, someone had delivered himself to the door. The Dragon King of the East Sea had sent a clone. As mentioned before, the technique of transforming the soul into the real body could be practiced when one entered the realm of true. But just like, when one reached the age of 22-20, he could find a girlfriend or a boyfriend to register for marriage, not everyone could get the method to practice it. But this one actually managed to practice it, which showed that he had some magical powers. Unfortunately, he met Li Yunxin. The clone of the Dragon King of the East Sea could take down the 9th young master, who was at the peak of the realm of true, but only injured his legs. Therefore, the cultivation of his original body might be even higher than that of Li Yunxin. However, at that time, Li Yunxin had already started to draw this Ling Tu, and he was also a dragon, so he also had the ability to summon clouds and rain. With the two together, he was also a big demon of the mysterious realm. He easily killed the clone of the Dragon King of the East Sea, and did not let him gain any advantage. If the clone was killed by an ordinary cultivator or demon, it would not be a big deal for the Dragon King of the East Sea. His original body had a close connection with this vast ocean. In theory, as long as the chi between heaven and earth did not disappear, the cultivation of his original body could be restored very quickly. Perhaps this was the reason why no one could beat the Shinryu. If an ordinary person lost a mysterious realm clone, they would be seriously injured, and it would take a long time, a huge amount of Reiki and the power of will to restore it. But this Dragon King of the East Sea was inseparable from heaven and earth. How abundant was the Reiki between heaven and earth? He was like a small water bottle under a large tank of water. Even if it was a little empty, it would quickly fill up. With such ability and reliance. No wonder he claimed to be the orthodox dragons, and called the dragon son of the land trash. No wonder he dared to let his clone appear on this ship, and did not take too much precautions. Unfortunately, he was unlucky to meet Li Yunxin. It was not a big deal that the clone was destroyed, but it was destroyed and kept by Li Yunxin. He kept the clone of the Dragon King and printed it on the scroll. Thus, his doppelganger became a primer, and also the eye of the array of this scroll. The Dragon King of the East Sea in the distant Penglai Island and the Qi between the sea and the sky were all pulled into Li Yunxin's painting because of such a primer. Sealing this clone was like sealing the anthropomorphic East Sea. Sealing the anthropomorphic East Sea was like sealing the Dragon King of the East Sea in the Penglai Island. This kind of profound relationship was extremely difficult to understand if one was not a painter. If this painting was completed, although it couldn't be like the celestial beings in the stories where they could draw a line on a piece of paper and make that person disappear in reality, he could always add a lot of detail to it, and it was guaranteed to be a big surprise. Now everything was ready. The question was whether it was possible to draw such a spirit map with the various changes and details of the vast ocean in a situation where the spiritual qi between heaven and earth was so chaotic that there was no pattern to follow. Anyone would think that it was impossible. But now Li Yunxin was still sketching on the paper seriously and casually. After adding a few more strokes, he looked at Lu Baishui. "Brother Lu, this is called Lingtu. Have you heard of Lingtu before?" Of course, Lu Baishui had never heard of it. He subconsciously looked at Pan He next to him. Even though Pan He was a decisive person, he was not as good as Lu Baishui at keeping a straight face. But maybe because of her background, this woman was like a beast, and she was more sensitive to danger than ordinary people. Although this sense of smell had put her in danger again and again, at least for now, she frowned and shrank to the wall. Because she had realized that this Li Yunxin should be an extremely terrible person. In front of such a person, the best thing to do was not to speak, not to move, and to answer whatever was asked. That was the only way to save her life. Therefore, when she heard the conversation between Lu Baishui and Li Yunxin, she felt cold all over and secretly broke out in a cold sweat. When Lu Baishui looked at her again, the woman immediately winked at him. It seemed that she was afraid that Lu Baishui would really annoy Li Yunxin, and she would also be in trouble. Li Yunxin knew what she was doing. He didn't move his eyes away from the scroll. Holding the pen in his hand, he only said lightly, "Don't worry. I also want to ask you. It seems that you have guessed who I am. Why don't you tell Brother Lu about it? If you are right, maybe immortality is waiting for you." Who dared to take the immortality he gave? Upon hearing his words, Pan He, who had been cowering in fear, immediately fell to her knees and kowtowed repeatedly. "Dragon King. Dragon King, please spare my life. Dragon King, please spare my life." Lu Baishui was stunned. What? But Li Yunxin didn't pay attention to him. His pen moved a few more times on the paper, sketching a few unintelligible circles. After Pan He kowtowed more than 10 times and the skin on her forehead was broken, she said, "Well, I said immortality is a blessing. You said spare my life. Spare what life?" We all know what the Dragon King did in the city of Wei. Pan He was dizzy from kowtowing, so she took a rest while answering. The Dragon King also said to someone in the city of Wei. Li Yunxin finally glanced at her. "You also know this? It seems that you have done a thorough investigation. Oh, you are really annoying." It was only after he said this that he truly looked at Pan He and stopped writing. It seemed that he was going to ask this question seriously, or that he had encountered a bottleneck in his painting. "A few nights ago, you came to my cabin to find me." He looked at Pan He and said expressionlessly, "When you saw me, you told me that you were in charge of the Donghai Kingdom of the Freemasonry. After a few words, you wanted to kill me. Tonight, you went to that guy's room and took off your clothes. Tell me, did he look prettier than me or did I look uglier than him?" Pan He was also stunned like Lu Baishui. On the one hand, it was because the memories in her mind, because of the words of Li Yunxin, reappeared in her mind as if the seal had been unlocked. On the other hand, she didn't know what Li Yunxin meant by asking her this. She tried to calm herself down quickly. She carefully recalled his tone and expression just now. He wanted to know what the last 2 sentences, "Does he look prettier than me?" and "Or do I look uglier than him?" were referring to, and what was the deeper meaning behind them. But after a few seconds she still couldn't figure it out. Instead, she felt even more confused and didn't know how to answer. Li Yunxin seemed to be angry. He glared at her. "Oh? So, you don't want to hurt me now?" Hearing this, Pan He hurriedly kowtowed again. "Dragon King, please spare my life. Dragon King, please spare my life." She had heard about Li Yunxin before. Actually, it wasn't a secret in the Freemasonry. Although the Freemasonry was so big, there were more things to deal with and do besides Li Yunxin's business. But after all, for so many years, it was rare to use a large number of resources for a long time for a person. Later, Li Yunxin did a lot of great things in Yunshan. Even though she wasn't in a high position before, she still remembered the recent legendary figure in her heart. Based on the information she knew, the image of Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin could be roughly described as moody, scheming, and decisive. She also knew that almost everywhere he went was turned into scorched earth, and very few people were spared. He was in the city of Wei. Several months later, the city of Wei was burned down. Later he went to Rong City. Soon Rong City was also occupied by the rebel army. Then he went to Pit Mountain. The lair of a mysterious realm monster for many years was blown up in the middle. Then he went to Dongting where he used to live. It was also poisoned by poisonous water. So far there were few people within a radius of dozens of miles. Then he stayed in the wild forest for some days. Now it should be called the former wild forest. Finally he went to Yunshan. Everyone knew what happened to Yunshan. This guy was shrouded in a terrible aura of destruction. Those who met him were all unlucky. Now Pan-He was right under his nose and they were on the same boat. She could almost predict the fate of this boat. Hearing two questions from such a person, how was she supposed to answer? At this time Lu Baishui finally frowned. You? Brotherly you? Dragon King? Li Yunxin looked at him and grinned. I'm not a human. I'm a monster. Not only a monster but also... Speaking up to this point, his body suddenly expanded, and he revealed his fiend god body. When he was still in the true realm, his godly devil body had slight changes because of the improvement of his realm. For example, the top of the original cyan scales had small golden thorns. The pair of blood-red coral antlers also seemed to be formed from many overlapping sharp light swords. Now he was in the mysterious realm, and the changes of his godly devil body were also bigger. The golden light on the scales became brighter, and the light horns on his forehead became fewer and fewer, looking more and more like the two pairs of sharp blades on Shinryu's forehead. He retracted his godly devil body and said the last few words, the monster among the monsters, the Dragon King of the land. Brother Lu, now you know two Dragon Kings? Li Yunxin stared at him. Which one is the king of Shinryu? Lu Baishui's expression finally changed. He took 2 steps back, looked at Pan-He and then looked at Li Yunxin. You are... After saying these words with a blank face, he suddenly stood still and frowned. So what you said before, which one is true and which one is false? Before Li Yunxin showed his godly devil body, his power was already quite terrifying. Just now, when he showed his real body, Pan-He was even more frightened and she wanted to hide in a crack. Hearing Lu Baishui's words, she suddenly jumped up from the ground and shouted, Are you crazy? How dare you talk to him like this? He is the Dragon King, the Dragon King. After shouting these words, she reached out her hand to pull Lu Baishui to stop talking and kneel down with her. However, she had been tortured and frightened the whole night, so she was no match for Lu Baishui. Before her fingers could touch the Sea King's sleeve, Lu Baishui shook his shoulder and pushed her to the side. This time he used a lot of strength. Pan-He felt her hands and feet were numb, and she didn't have the strength to stand up. She had been working hard on the ship these days, but in the end, everything was out of her control. It was okay if she lost to monsters and cultivators. Now she had lost to a mortal. It was as if anyone could defeat her. Everything she was proud of had turned into paper paste. Looking at Wu Jiasong lying on the ground, she didn't know if he was dead or alive, and suddenly felt sad. Finally, she burst into tears like a crazy person. Li Yunxin looked at her and snorted. Lu Baishui was stunned when he saw her like this. But after a short while he looked up to the sky and sighed, Good, good, good. What a good land Dragon King. Just standing here was enough to scare people to the point of insanity. If you want to listen, I will tell you. Chapter 619. Let's talk about Mr. Shueiyue first. Lu Baishui looked straight at Li Yunxin without a trace of fear. I never knew he was the Dragon King of the East Sea. Just like how I never knew you were the Dragon King of the East Sea. How did I get to know him? It's very simple. I'm a thief on the sea. One day more than 10 years ago, Mr. Shueiyue found me and said that he was a strange person living in seclusion in the East Sea, working for the Dragon King of the East Sea. He asked me to help him. The help I did was something I did casually, when I plundered the merchant ships. If I caught some scholars or craftsmen, I would first place them in Aquarius Bay. When there were more people, he would bring them to Penglai Island in the East Sea. He said that the Dragon King of the East Sea was going to build a palace and needed such talents. After going there, he could get rid of his previous poor days and live like an immortal. Li Yunxin's pen tapped on the paper again and he couldn't help but laugh, but he didn't look at Lu Baishui. So you really believed him? Speaking of which, let me change the subject. Brother Lu, you are a righteous and upright person on the continent. But on the sea, you became a pirate who plundered the sea and even engaged in human trafficking. I really don't understand. Why did you choose such a way of life? Li Yunxin's tone was flat, and it was hard to tell whether he was really puzzled or mocking. At this moment, Lu Baishui stood in front of him looking a little embarrassed. Previously, Mr. Shuiwei set off a big wave on the sea, and the seawater soaked the bodies of the people who were still on the deck. Lu Baishui's hair and clothes were wet and stuck to his body, and he didn't look as cool as before. But at this time, after hearing Li Yunxin's question, he still looked very calm. I became the Sea King to return a favor. I met the former Sea King on the land in my early years and received his favor. Later, before he died, he asked me to avenge him, so I naturally kept my promise. But after avenging him, there are thousands of pirates in the Aquarius Bay. If I let them go, the coastal area will suffer. The Sea King isn't the only pirate in the East Sea. The rest of the pirates, big and small? Li Yunxin nodded and raised his hand to interrupt him. Oh, I understand. In order to repay a debt of gratitude, he killed the Sea King at that time. He still had to deal with this mess in the future. If your character hasn't collapsed yet, you should be thinking of using these forces in your hands to slowly eliminate the rest of the pirates. After that, we can slowly discuss the matter of surrendering to the government or enlisting them for amnesty. Then this year. He pointed at his feet. These two ships suddenly went to the stormy waves path to find the governor, saying that they had rebelled. Was it because of this? I'm guessing you're having an internal conflict. Some are willing to surrender while others want to be thieves. Lu Baishui put his hands behind his back. You already know. There's no need for me to waste my breath. At this time, a sailor ran up from the previously chaotic bilge and asked Lu Baishui what they should do next. But as soon as he poked his head out, he saw the scene on the deck and was momentarily stunned. Lu Baishui turned around and asked the man about the situation under the boat. Li Yunxin allowed him to ask and turned to look at Pan He and Wu Jiasong. At this time he was drawing a picture on a table. Lu Baishui stood dripping wet and talked to the sailor who was looking around in bewilderment. As for Pan He, she had a mental breakdown and was wailing loudly. Now no one was paying attention to her and she was sobbing softly. Wu Jiasong was lying beside her, not knowing if he was dead or alive. She cried for a while and crawled over to feel his pulse. Li Yunxin could somewhat understand this woman's mood at this time. She was originally a Freemasonry master with her own business. Although the man beside her was good to her, it was nothing compared to the vast space in her career. She boarded the boat and wanted to entice Xie Sheng to go to Dragon Island. She originally thought that it would not be easy but not too difficult. Once she succeeded, she would be promoted and become a CEO or general manager. From then on, she would completely get rid of the days of squeezing into the subway from 9 to 5, lacking sleep and constantly worrying about being fired. She would also have a scattered and unmotivated other half at home, who knew that when she really stepped into another world, she would know how terrible it was there. From the outside, it looked like a fantasy, magnificent and extravagant life. In fact, it was treacherous and treacherous. Only then did she realize that her cultivation was not enough and she barely lived. No one on the boat was someone she could fight. They were all more powerful than her and more capable than her. She suffered setbacks at every step. She lost her past and didn't get a bright future. So she began to miss the fragmented warmth and simplicity of the past. Regardless of whether this feeling was long-lasting or temporary, at this moment, Pan He must have lost all her self-confidence and self-esteem, and when she was in an extremely low mood, she once again remembered Wu Jiasong's good side. Fortunately, the slap wasn't light, but it wasn't fatal. She wanted to stab him again, but was stopped by Mr. Shuiwei. Then she saw Li Yunxin appear. She knew that this matter was over. Originally he wanted to get close to Xie Sheng. But with Li Yunxin, that fiend, around, what else could he do? Li Yunxin looked at her shivering and miserable appearance in the cold wind and rain and laughed. It's a little too late to regret now. I guess your man has a skull fracture and brain hemorrhage. His liver was also ruptured by you. Oh, his intestines are like fried dough twists. Won't he shit out of his mouth later? Speaking to this point, he paused for a moment before continuing. Anyway, it's hard to save him with medicine. How about this? You tell me everything you know about the Freemasons' hideout and personnel system. I'll save his life. How about this? Pan He looked at him with tears in her eyes. You, she wanted to agree. But there was always a glimmer of hope in her heart, like a spark hidden in the embers. She felt that maybe by chance, there might be a chance to turn things around. She had lost too much and was about to become a bankrupt gambler. Although stopping was a wise choice, there was also the terrifying temptation of turning things around. Just as she was hesitating, the cabin door on the second floor finally opened with a loud bang. When Mr. Shueiyue was here, she used her supernatural power to seal the cabin door. Thus, Xiexing was trapped inside, not knowing what had happened outside. At this time, since Mr. Shueiyue's doppelganger had dispersed, the restriction had also loosened. But even so, it took a lot of effort to blast open the cabin door. He saw the scene in front of him. Xiexing saw Li Yunxin first and immediately froze, speechless for a moment. Who would have thought that so many days had passed since they parted in Dingzhou, and now that they were on the sea, he would meet this person again? After being stunned for 2 breaths' time, he forcibly suppressed the fluctuating expression on his face. Standing at the cabin door, he cupped his hands together like a hoodlum. I didn't expect to meet you here again. Really? But Li Yunxin pointed a finger at him. Xiexing's expression and movements immediately froze on his face. His body had completely left his control, turning into a clay statue. I'm very unhappy with you now. You can stand as punishment first. Li Yunxin glanced at him, his gaze once again landing on Pan He. You played with this guy for an entire night. In the end, after using a medicinal dregs to heal you, you still have to dig it out of your mouth. TSK. It really makes me sad to see this. Since you can't decide whether or not to save your man, then ask him himself. As he said this, he suddenly flicked his finger. At the tip of his finger, a golden pill flew into Wu Jiasong's mouth with a whoosh. Wu Jiasong was unconscious, his mouth tightly shut, so his teeth were all shattered. But what was surprising was that the moment the teeth shattered, not even the dregs splashed out, they grew back as if in a mirage. Not only the teeth, but the bruises and blood on his face that had been caused by the collision also healed. His skin was as smooth as a baby's. His entire person looked as soft as a 180-kilogram child. The man who had narrowly escaped death let out a spasmodic gasp and suddenly opened his eyes. Like he had just woken up from a dream, he was muddle-headed for a moment and couldn't figure out the situation. Li Yunxin pointed his finger at him and stopped him. Let's take things one by one. Brother Lu, now that you've finished explaining, can you continue? At this time, Lu Baishui had already given the sailor many instructions and sent him away. There were only these few people left on the deck. However, the relationship between these few people was extremely complicated, and they were constantly scheming against each other. It was even more lively than the 100 or so people in the cabin. He looked at Xiexing, Wu Jiasong and Pan He. Then he looked at Li Yunxin. You can already guess what I want to say. As for you saying that I am a human trafficker, before I kidnap people I asked them all. Those who had good family backgrounds, wives and parents to support, I let them go when I could. Most of the people I took away were exiled and had a poor life. Maybe there were times when I made mistakes, but I was originally a pirate. I tried my best. As for Mr. Shueiyue, Lu Baishui looked at Li Yunxin. According to my understanding of him, he is a man of his word. Even if he is a demon, he is not a demon that eats people. Li Yunxin stopped writing and listened to him. After a while, he looked up at him. That's it? Lu Baishui sighed. That's it. Ha, you are saying good things about him in front of me. Brother Lu, you are really brave. I'm just telling the truth. If you are angry because of this, you can kill me to vent your anger. But my brothers on the ship don't know. I have already told them. If I die, I will still send you to Aquarius Bay. Brother Li, you can rest assured. Li Yunxin clicked his tongue and shook his head. Brother Lu, you are the first one to make me angry and live until now. Do you know why I am so tolerant of you? Lu Baishui did not speak. Li Yunxin picked up her brush and thought for a while. She said softly, there are different kinds of people. The first kind are good people. Good people are naturally good people. Honest, friendly, amiable, decent and moral. But these kinds of people are too few. His eyes returned to the paper. There were some shapes on the paper. It was not a drawing method known to this world. Big and small whirlpools and circles densely covered the sea and sky. At first glance, it made people feel strange and frightened, as if the whole world was made up of these flowing circles and lines, and if they were not careful, they would be sucked in. Chapter 620. Lu Baishui frowned suspiciously. He didn't know why Li Yunxin suddenly talked about good people. He wasn't young and naive. In fact, because of his special background, he knew that there were almost no good people in this world. Almost everyone did things for the sake of profit. Even those who preach about benevolence, righteousness, and morality, and seem to practice what they preach might not have the opportunity to do evil. So he gave up thinking about what was good and bad and just did things. He was like this. His brother Li didn't hesitate to kill people, and he was a demon. Did he really believe in good and bad? He was confused and couldn't understand. Just like how Pan he couldn't understand what was the deeper meaning behind, he is prettier than me, and I am uglier than him. He heard Li Yunxin say, the second type are ordinary people. Ordinary people and good people don't look very different. But ordinary people will do evil when they have the chance. But if they don't have the chance, they won't create the chance to do evil. There are many of these people in the mortal world. But in the cultivation world, in the demon world, and even among the mortals I have met, they are rare. He added a few more strokes on the scroll and glanced at Pan He. The third type are bad people. For example, this woman. She's like ordinary people usually. But the difference is that ordinary people have the chance to do evil, and they know their limits. One person found a shop door open and ran in to steal a few things. But they know their limits and they don't dare to hire more people and empty the whole shop. But this woman can do great things and do great evil. So she is a very, very bad person. Pan He shrank back. She glanced at Wu Jiasong and then quickly looked away. Lu Baishui didn't know what he meant by this. But at this point he still smiled faintly and said, shouldn't the third type be evil? Bad people? Li Yunxin smiled. In my world, how can they be considered bad people? Real bad people don't treat people as people. They only treat them like plants and they don't feel guilty when using them. This woman was still far from being an evil person. That person is the real villain. After saying this, he pointed at Xie Sheng. There are many people like him. Cultivators and fiendish demons were mostly of the fourth type. I don't like any of them. Lu Baishui thought for a moment. Then which one am I? You're somewhere between the first and the second. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked at him. People like you are hard to come by in my world. You've lied to me the first time and the second time, so much so that I can't bear to kill you to vent my anger. Thinking, there are so many bastards in the world and the world is dark and gloomy. People like you and old Lu are the only light I can see. It would be a pity to kill you. Although I'm also a bastard, I'm also a person who loves beauty. Even if you aren't a good person, who wouldn't like a good person? Lu Baishui was silent about this evaluation. When he met Li Yunxin for the first time, his evaluation of Li Yunxin was probably the first type, a rare, talented, and gentle person. But later he found that his appearance began to change, and it became more and more beyond his imagination. At this moment, Lu Baishui didn't know how to evaluate him. He was a fiendish demon. And a fiendish demon among fiendish demons. It was hard to comment on the standard of using people. Now he talked about the difference between good and evil and said that he was a good person. What did he want to do? Just because he was a good person, he wouldn't make things difficult for him, right? But just as this thought came to his mind, he heard Li Yunxin say, I realized this when I saw this bastard and this evil person together tonight. I really can't bear to kill you. It's like when I'm admiring flowers and my hand is pricked by thorns, but I can't bear to crush the flowers. So we're fine. I believe what you said. When we arrive at Aquarius Bay, I'll go see where you met Shueyu and see what kind of people she needs, and then I won't bother you anymore. Lu Baishui frowned. You? He wanted to ask, is this true? But he also felt that if he asked, it would be rude to Brother Li and also to himself. He was prepared to die, in the worst-case scenario. But now, the clouds suddenly parted and the moon brightened up, which made him a little helpless. So he was stunned for a while and then said, Brother Li, you're so broad-minded. Li Yunxin laughed. You saved yourself. If you are the second or third kind of person. Originally, I planned to care about your life and death when we reached the sea. So, you see, evil people are annoying. Speaking of this, he pointed at Xie Sheng. You're an annoying evil person. Damn it. Previously, I kept you alive and coaxed you not to force yourself because I thought I could get more information by secretly observing you. But now, first of all, I understand one thing. Second of all, you and I have been exposed. Li Yunxin's expression became cold, so I don't have the mood to play with you anymore. 3 questions. First, what kind of world do you come from? Second, what secrets do you have? Third, what kind of person is a celestial being? After saying these, I'll let you die a quick death. Because of this finger, Xie Sheng could move freely. But now that he had some cultivation, he knew better than Lu Baishui how strong this person in front of him was. Not to mention anything else, just the pill he used to save that man just now. Compared to the pill he used to treat Panhe's injuries and dug out of her mouth, it was like the world's top delicacy was rotten food in the mud. This thing, he used it to save a mortal. Xiexing slowly moved his body, aware of a strong sense of crisis. He calmed himself down and let out a sigh. You really are not one of us. So who are you? He had reason to believe that one of us was protecting him. Maybe he would have to wait for the real crisis to appear, or maybe he would need time to come. So he wanted to delay as much time as possible. After the enemy succeeded, it was usually effective to induce him to reveal his identity and purpose. It was not unreasonable for villains to like to talk a lot. Ordinary people would like to show off when they bought a new affordable product, not to mention a victory that was a matter of life and death. Li Yunxin said softly, Me? I was once mistaken for you by your people. I suffered for you and also enjoyed a blessing for you. But in the end I found you before your people. If you are still asking me questions after the count of 3, you will die miserably. Now let me say it. When he said these words he did not avoid the 3 people on the deck, and his hands did not stop. But it seemed that his creation had hit a bottleneck, and his pen moved slowly, and from time to time he looked up at Xiexing as if he wanted to look at him carefully. If Xiexing knew painting he should be terrified now. Because Li Yunxin was carefully observing the flow of his qi, his appearance and his form. Xiexing was shocked. If what Li Yunxin said was true, it meant that he might really fall into this guy's hands now, and the help he thought before was gone. He wanted to save himself. Between momentum and power, he barely had the former. Realizing this, he no longer maintained a cautious and humble attitude, and also laid his cards on the table. I see. Good. So from the time you met me I have always been in your plan. So the little monster protection you said before was also misled by you? Xiexing said as he looked at Li Yunxin's expression. The latter did not hide his pride or affirmation, so Xiexing immediately got the answer. He smiled and shook his head, pacing 2 steps. Since you can ask me where I come from, then you are not from our world. But you should know a little about us. I will tell you one thing. My world is far more powerful than you can imagine. You people are trapped on the ground and the sea and you feel free to fly in the sky. But in my world we travel the universe and break the void. You should have a general idea of what I said. You can threaten me. But if I die, someone else will come, Xiexing said calmly. I advise you not to be my enemy. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. This reaction made Xiexing feel a little relieved. So he wanted to change his tone and say something else. To give this person a way out, temporarily get over this disaster. And then, but he saw Li Yunxin smile, travel the universe and break the void. You want to say you can travel the universe? Xiexing was stunned. Lu Baishui and Panhe were also stunned. But the 2 of them did not know what travel the universe meant, and Xiexing was confused because, how could he say these words? If he knew these words, why did he ask where he came from? If what you said is true, it is indeed more powerful than my world. But you didn't answer my question. You have one last chance to answer my 3 questions honestly. Now I will say 2. Xiexing frowned in surprise. Are you crazy? Since you are not from here, you should know that this place can be destroyed at any time. What I know is the only way to save you. How dare you threaten me now? Destroyed at any time? Li Yunxin tilted his head and thought for a moment. Fresh? Do you mean at any time? Or a few thousand years later, at most 100,000 years? Xiexing stared at him. Oh, maybe we don't have the same definition of the word at any time. At least a few thousand years. That's enough for me to live freely. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. So now you still want to hide it from me? I will say 3. Xiexing was even more surprised. You, even if it's 1,000 years, are you willing to stay here? It's not like you haven't seen the outside world. Can you endure here? Li Yunxin sighed and interrupted him. Why not? For me, my life in this world, at least for now, is the real life, my friend. As he said, he put down his pen, took out a scroll from his sleeve and unfolded it on the table. Chapter 6:21. The 3 mortals didn't dare to look at the painting on the table. However, Xiexing could look at it. It was a long scroll. On it, there were some childish images drawn on it, and there were also names marked on top of their heads. If he didn't see it wrongly, the name of the scroll should be, Visiting the Zoo on a Sunny Morning. Then Li Yunxin frowned slightly and gestured with her fingers on the drawings one by one, as if she was trying to find the one she wanted. She muttered without rhyme or reason, I know you. You're the same as me, you have a different background so you naturally have a sense of superiority. You should be the center of your life. In your eyes, you are the main character of this world. Of course, what's worse is that this is the truth. You hid in the mountains for so many years, and every misfortune turned into a blessing. Even now you are still growing. You are so talented and you reached the emptiness realm in just 10 days. I still have many plans for the future. Even now, I am still thinking about what to do and what to do next. It's hard to feel hopeless and I don't believe what will happen to me. At this point, Li Yunxin's finger stopped on the painting and pointed. Found it? Mermaid sex. Good. That's it. Then he raised his head and looked at Xie Sheng, whose brows were tightly furrowed, as if he was still trying to guess what Li Yunxin wanted to do and what tricks she was going to use to deal with him. Now I will say 3. He knocked on the scroll with his finger. A gust of demonic wind suddenly rose from the table. A huge body quickly formed in the demonic wind. It looked like a 3-meter-tall strong man. Its upper body was that of a human, and its lower body was that of a fish. However, it only looked like it. Its face was ferocious and dirty, as if its skin had been peeled off and was covered with slimy mucus. Its body was also covered with mucus, but there was also something else that seemed out of place: barnacles. Barnacles were recognized by people who lived by the sea. Small, sharp-edged things that were thickly spread over the rocks and under the bottom of the ship. If someone accidentally brushed against the rocks covered with barnacles, their skin would be torn open. Now the body and tail of this segmented mermaid were covered in this stuff. They were densely packed like the scales of dragons. However, the scariest part was where the human body and the fishtail met. There was actually a long, protruding crevice in what looked like a person's crotch. As soon as the beast appeared, Li Yunxin drew a circle in the air and restrained it. It rolled and howled in the circle as if it was suffering great torture. Then the crack beneath him suddenly opened, and out popped a giant object the size of an adult's arm. In the end, it was a non-human beast. Even that thing was covered in barnacles, barely concealing the bulging veins on it, so it wasn't too shameful. Li Yunxin had suddenly released such a monster. For a moment, no one knew what he was going to do. With a flick of his finger, another golden core shot into the strange beast's mouth. Instantly, a deafening shriek numbed everyone's eardrums. The monster's body expanded even more after receiving the elixir's power. With bright light shooting out from its eyes, it stared at Pan He on the deck and stuck out its stinky red tongue, wanting to grab her in its arms and squeeze her dry. Pan He had been ravaged by Xie Sheng before, and the scene was still vivid in her mind. Now, seeing the thing on the strange beast that was as thick as her thigh, she was so frightened that she even forgot to cry. However, Li Yunxin only snorted coldly. He waved his hand. The invisible barrier that was trapping the strange beast suddenly expanded, trapping Xie Sheng within it. Even though Xie Sheng didn't know what Li Yunxin was going to do, he knew that this horrifying strange beast wasn't a good one. Golden light flashed in his hand and 12 light swords appeared around him. While flying to the side, he shouted at Li Yunxin, "What are you doing? You dare to kill me? You're seeking death. Idiot." However, the merman wasn't interested in Xie Sheng at this moment. His horrifying face was pressed against the seal, his thick and hideous arms were about to tear the seal apart as he pounced on Pan He. One of the fish's tails was flapping loudly, and the giant creature was also swaying wildly behind the restrictive spell. It was so frightening that one felt like their liver was going to explode. Li Yunxin ignored it. Instead, he looked at Lu Baishui, who was dumbfounded. "Brother Lu, this thing is called a merman. It's said to be a strange beast that lives in the sea. Have you seen it before?" How could Lu Baishui say anything? He just shook his head subconsciously. Li Yunxin picked up the brush again and waved his finger at Wu Jiasong, making him tilt his head so that he could see Xie Sheng. While continuing to draw, he said, "It's said that this thing is lascivious." Lascivious? Of course, it wants to lascivious the opposite sex first. But if there is no opposite sex, it's okay for a man to do it. Because this thing doesn't eat seafood and needs to collect yang and yin essence to live. If it yells at me rudely like this, it will notice it soon. At that time. Ha ha ha. Hearing this, Xie Sheng's hatred was about to burst. He raised his voice and yelled at Li Yunxin, "Idiot! Do you know what it means if you kill me? No one will know in 1,000 years." But Li Yunxin smiled at Lu Baishui. "Brother Lu, listen to this. A man shouldn't think too highly of himself. He acts like the world will be destroyed without him. Don't you hate him?" Saying this, the merman stopped roaring at Pan He. This kind of strange beast was naturally sensitive to spiritual power, and it knew that the barrier in front of it was not something it could break. It suddenly turned around and stared at Xie Sheng. Xie was startled and flicked his fingers. 4 flying swords shot out with a buzzing sound. The strange beast didn't dodge but took the 4 swords, not even a scratch was left on it. Instead, the golden swords turned into spots of light. This could only mean there was a huge gap between them. Seeing this, Xie was stunned. Knowing that there was no other way, he finally yelled, "Fine. I'll talk. Take it first, I'll talk." Li Yunxin finally turned around and looked at him. After 2 breaths of time, when the merman was close to him, he sighed, "If you were so smart, why did you come?" Xie heaved a sigh of relief. "Get it out of here." But Li Yunxin laughed, "But it's too late. As you all know, I'm an honest man." His face turned cold. "Enjoy the feeling of being used as a tool." Before Xie could say anything, the merman's huge body suddenly pounced over and hugged him. A spot of light suddenly appeared in his arms, which was the golden swords protecting Xie were all broken. Screams sounded. Li Yunxin flicked his fingers and the barrier disappeared. The merman suddenly turned around, holding Xie tightly and falling into the water. The screams suddenly stopped and only the sound of water splashing could be heard. The force was so strong that even the huge ship seemed to be swaying rhythmically. After 3 or 4 breaths of time, a large amount of red blood appeared on the surface of the sea. The onlookers were dumbfounded. Li Yunxin, however, frowned. "Useless stuff." He hooked the merman with his free hand. The merman's huge body was like a fish on a hook, and it was pulled up by an invisible force, tossing and turning continuously. They also saw that the strange beast was holding a human figure tightly in its arms. The reason why it was a human figure was because the skin on its head was torn and the flesh was exposed. Especially in its mouth there was a bloody hole. At this moment, it wasn't its mouth that was injured but its lower body. The lower body roared angrily because it was pulled out of the water, and it moved vigorously. Every time it moved, a large amount of flesh and blood would splatter. Even Lu Baishui frowned and looked away. However, one person didn't turn his head. Instead, he stared at the merman, and the light in his eyes seemed to be even brighter than the merman's. It was Wu Jiasong. Xie had reached the emptiness realm, but he still had the strength to speak. "You don't do well?" The merman seemed to hate people talking. As soon as it heard him speak, it immediately turned the body in its hand and struck it hard. With a "pa" sound, brains splattered everywhere. It actually pierced through the head of an emptiness realm cultivator. Xie finally stopped breathing. He couldn't be more dead. However, the merman's corpse was still there. Lu Baishui couldn't bear to watch. Li Yunxin was quite interested. He clicked his tongue and said, "This merman has such a strong spirit. Can even compete with a strange beast called a teddy. Wu clan's shopkeeper, do you feel better watching it?" Wu Jiasong was frozen, so he couldn't say anything. But the resentful splendor in her eyes clearly answered his question. Li Yunxin waved his hand and patted the scroll. The merman, which was originally transformed by the demonic wind, suddenly turned back into the demonic wind in midair. He became the abstract and funny figure on the scroll again. Xie body fell on the deck. He could not bear to see it. Only a head and 4 limbs could be seen. His body had turned into a bloody paste. The merman's body was full of barnacles that were as sharp as knives. It was hard to imagine how painful it was to fall into the sea while carrying him. But compared to the physical pain, perhaps the mental torture was even more fatal. He was shocked like a wooden statue. He didn't move or speak. Lu Baishui took a few steps back to stay away from the corpse. He was ready to die when he talked to Li Yunxin. Now, when he saw Xie miserable state, he took a deep breath. If it was him just now, once he had this thought. He immediately moved his eyes away from Li Yunxin. A quarter of an hour ago he dared to comment on Brother Li. But now, after witnessing what he had done, he felt that there was nothing more to say. It wasn't because he was disappointed. But, when 2 ordinary people met, they might be able to make some comments about each other. Even if one of them had more wealth and power, as long as it was within an acceptable range, they would still be able to remain calm and collected in relative situations. However, if one of them had the most powerful power in the world, such as becoming an emperor, then it was unlikely that he would have a friend. And it would be difficult for that friend to comment on him. Because from a certain point of view, they were already 2 different kinds of creatures. Lu Baishui now saw Li Yunxin's magical powers and methods. He finally realized that the person in front of him was not his brother Li. He was a demon, not a human. Chapter 622. It was as if she had seen through his thoughts. Li Yunxin looked at him and smiled. "Yes. Looks like we can't even be friends anymore." He added a few more strokes to the paper, and his expression became slightly emotional. He sighed, "AI." Lu Baishui hesitated for a while when he saw how depressed he was. In the end he said, "Perhaps one day you and I." Li Yunxin raised his hand to interrupt him. He shook his head and smiled. "Brother Lu, you misunderstood. I'm just lamenting. The feeling of having great power and being able to control the fate of others is really great. I'm almost addicted to this feeling." Lu Baishui was speechless and sighed. Li Yunxin tilted his head and looked at him. "What are your plans for the future? I know you're going to Aquarius Bay. Brother, it's your responsibility. All I can do for you, a good man, is to give you 10 days of time. Within 10 days, if the East Sea doesn't stir up any waves, I'll give you time to leave. What happens after that?" Lu Baishui shook his head. "Let's leave it to fate." Li Yunxin snorted and glanced at Xie Xing's body from the corner of his eyes. "There is no such thing as God's will in this world. You'd better plan carefully. As a person, you will be very tired in the coming period of time. How about, are you interested in becoming a demon? A cultivator?" Lu Baishui said, "No." Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows in surprise. "I thought you would consider it." Lu Baishui smiled and said, "If I have a fortuitous encounter or if I am interested in cultivation, maybe I will. But not now. Just because I was afraid of living a hard life, I gave up my human body and became a monster or a cultivator. Then I wouldn't be Lu Baishui." Li Yunxin sighed. "What I want to give you is real longevity. Well, I never force people. I'll show you the way. If he didn't want to stay in Donghai, he could go to you. Don't you know Black Blade Hero Ing? Now that the hero has become the emperor, he should be able to allow you to hide your identity and be Lu Baishui. I still have something to take care of, Brother Lu, please." As he spoke, he raised his hand. Before Lu Baishui could refuse, a gust of demonic wind swept him far away. Lu Baishui stood still at the stern of the ship and looked over for a while. But his face could not be seen clearly in the darkness, and he finally lifted his foot and walked slowly away. When Li Yunxin was talking to him, one of his hands was on his unfinished painting. When Lu Baishui was not there, he moved his hand away. Under his hand was a small human figure on the painting. Between those strange circles and lines, Xie Sheng's conscious soul was imprisoned on the paper. Li Yunxin thought for a moment and picked up his pen again. Next to the little figure that represented Xie Sheng, there was another lifelike figure. That was a segmented shark. Then he rolled up the incomplete spirit map. Then he put away the table. He glanced at Pan He and Wu Jiasong, turned around and walked away without saying a word. It was not until Li Yunxin's figure really disappeared in the darkness that Pan He recovered from her sluggish state. Her expression became one of panic and confusion. She thought that what awaited her would be the same torture as Xie Sheng. Li Yunxin rated her as a rotten person. Who would have thought that he would only kill Xie Sheng and leave her here? Was he letting her go? She sat like this for a while and found that Wu Jiasong next to her slowly stood up. Pan He looked up at him. He also slightly lowered his head to look at her. Wu Jiasong was seriously injured and almost died, but he was saved by Li Yunxin. Now, the power of the Jin Dan almost made him reborn. Although without the protection of a cultivator he could not build the foundation of cultivation, the ocean of qi and mountain of snow. But among mortals he was already in an incredible peak state. The only word that could describe him was rejuvenation. The internal injuries and toxins left in his body over the years were all cleared. The organs and tissues that were aging after the peak period were also rejuvenated like newborn babies. When a baby was about to be born, the body had not yet developed to its peak state. The adult body was fully developed, but there were always regrets and it was also aging. However, at this moment Wu Jiasong took the advantages of both and avoided the disadvantages of both. Just as he stood up, an incredible change happened to him. It was as if he got rid of a lot of things just by standing there. His originally bloated body quickly became thin, and he became strong and lean. Even if he wasn't a handsome man, the clothes on his body were fluttering in the wind because he was too fat. But it could not hide the beauty of health that appeared because of his youth and vitality. But at this moment, Pan He's face was pale. Her hair was wet by the sea and stuck to her face in strands. Her eyes were red and swollen because of crying, and her body was also bruised when she rolled on the deck. She looked up at Wu Jiasong, and her eyes were full of fear and uneasiness. In fact, in terms of martial arts cultivation, Pan He could still easily kill the man in front of her. But at this moment, that resolute thought was gone. The devil Li Yunxin who almost destroyed Yunshan was here, and Xie Sheng died tragically in front of them. She had neither a future nor a way out. All she could do was to seize the moment. But in this world, if she abandoned her identity as the Freemasonry's leader and martial arts expert, she was probably only left with Wu Jiasong. The two looked at each other in the sea breeze for a few breaths. When Pan He's lips trembled slightly and she was about to speak, Wu Jiasong sighed and leaned over to pull her up into his arms. Pan He's body stiffened. But then it softened and she put her hands on Wu Jiasong's back and grabbed his clothes tightly. Although this man was completely different from the previous Wu Jiasong, she still felt that she could feel the familiar warmth. After such a terrible night and such a terrible disappointment, in this cold wind and rain, she finally felt the uneasy warmth. This warmth was like a huge hammer hitting her heart and she realized she almost missed something. She used to walk too fast and run too fast. She was so anxious that she didn't have time to stop and think about it. If one day she stood at the peak of power, what would she want in the end? Would it be the untouchable power or the dazzling but cold wealth? Neither of these could bring her warmth and comfort in this cold wind and rain. Pan He started to cry again. Wu Jiasong sighed again and patted her back gently, squeezing out some indistinct words from her throat. "Don't cry," he said softly. "What can we do? I know you did those things involuntarily. Alas." He rubbed his face on Pan He's wet hair. "Alas. I didn't know you before and I didn't know how scared you were every day. But now, it's all over. What can we do? Alas, let's live a good life. You and I still have many years. Let's talk things out. See how I can help you. I'll help you leave that hall. Let's continue to do business and make money and have a son, okay?" Pan He was still crying. But their clothes were soaked by the waves, so they were not afraid of being soaked by Pan He's tears again. She cried for a while and Wu Jiasong comforted her softly and patted her as if he was comforting a sad child. Okay. If you don't want to tell me, I won't ask. In the future, just pretend that I never knew these things. Don't cry. The wind is so strong and just now you... Be careful." Pan He sucked in a deep breath trying to stop her crying. But she didn't succeed. So she clenched her teeth, clutched Wu Jiasong's clothes, and breathed as if she was suffocating, and finally calmed herself down a little. I'll tell you. Jiasong." Her eyes were red and swollen and she hugged him tightly while sobbing. "We were in Baishan Road. My hall is in Baishan Road, in Sujia village. Pan He began to pour out her heart. These things had been hidden in her heart for too long, like a flood. But it was blocked by the dam built by things called hope, ambition, confidence, and so on. But now that the dam had collapsed, the flood had filled her heart, and she was almost out of breath. She wanted to pour out her heart, and maybe she didn't want to disappoint Wu Jiasong again at the end of the night. He was not the Wu Jiasong of the past. This not only meant that he had such a body, but also meant that in Pan He's eyes, she saw things that she hadn't noticed before: tolerance, gentleness, and consideration. She decided not to disappoint him anymore, and wanted to grasp the light in the midst of despair. Thus, the pouring out of her heart lasted for almost an hour. The two hugged each other on the deck in the wind and even forgot the cold. Until a glimmer of light appeared on the horizon. The long night was finally coming to an end, and the light was coming. Pan He stopped talking and leaned her head on Wu Jiasong's shoulder. She said everything, the things that woke her up from nightmares in many nights. She had never felt so relaxed and transparent. She had no secrets in her heart, so she had enough space to embrace the world and the man in her arms. The two hugged each other in silence for a while and their clothes were dry. Pan He saw a warm light on the horizon. She knew it was the morning sun. She finally felt a little happy because of the light. So she rubbed her face on Wu Jiasong's shoulder again. "Jiasong, do you know? Now I understand better. I'm not suitable for those things. We girls were bought by the Freemasons, trained, learned how to please people, learned how to please men and women. Even among the girls like me. I'm not the smartest one. Then you bought me and I followed you. I used to think I had no chance to make a name for myself in the Freemasons. But after all these years, almost all the girls who were sent to Jianghu with me died. Those who were stupider than me died, and those who were smarter than me also died. But I'm by your side because you saved my life. Ha! Everything I have today, everything I have in the Freemasons was actually given by you. Now I'm giving them all back for you and I don't feel sad. I just feel stupid." Pan He rubbed Wu Jiasong's shoulder gently. "We always knew that the Donghai Kingdom's manager of Munenju was in Xiaojing. But we've been living in Xiaojing for all these years. I've never found him. It's always been my worry. Now, forget it. Jiasong, I beg you one thing." Pan He wanted to look at Wu Jiasong's face. But Wu Jiasong hugged her gently, and she didn't continue to get up. Instead she continued, "Let's go back to the land, and leave Xiaojing. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but I'm afraid the people of Munanju won't let me go." Wu Jiasong was silent for a while. Then he hugged her tightly. He felt the man's warmth again. She knew that Wu Jiasong was telling her in this way that he agreed. She knew that Wu Jiasong wasn't a person who liked to show his feelings. But she never doubted his feelings. His feelings were as strong as his hug at this moment. He hugged her tighter and tighter. His two arms tightly wrapped around He's thin back, as if he wanted to embed her into his body. He began to feel a little suffocated. She rubbed Wu Jiasong's ear. "Jiasong," however, she immediately felt an even greater power interrupting her words and forcing her to swallow her breath. A trace of fear and palpitation suddenly flashed through He's consciousness. Her eyes suddenly widened as she realized something. But a stronger force came. This was definitely not a power that a mortal, even a mortal who had a perfect body because of the Jindan, should have. This kind of power could only belong to someone who had been immersed in martial arts for a long time, with vigorous internal energy. Before she heard the sound of her sternum breaking, he finally heard Wu Jiasong whisper in her ear, "Now you found me." The morning light quickly disappeared in front of her eyes. Chapter 623. When half of the sun rose from the sea, Wu Jiasong slowly walked 2 steps to the side of the ship. He was still in his arms. But her body was as soft as a doll. Her face was hanging on Wu Jiasong's shoulder. Her expression was a little strange. Usually people who were strangled to death would not look good. They should be frightened and angry. But on He's face, which Wu Jiasong did not look at, there was a mixture of fear, regret, relief, and happiness. She was not beautiful but not ugly either. Wu Jiasong slowly walked a few more steps to the side of the ship and stopped. At this time, the sea breeze blew He's hair and caressed his face. His face was expressionless, as calm as stagnant water. When he felt the hair caress him, he slightly narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if he wanted to keep He's smell in his heart. But what he smelled was the stench from He's body because of her incontinence. He frowned. He turned his face away and let go. He's body fell into the sea with her face facing the sky. After a while, some people began to look around on the deck. The people in the cabin did not know much about what happened on the deck. They only knew that the giant ship was almost capsized that night. They heard all kinds of terrible sounds and the smell of blood. They spent the whole night uneasily, and finally found that everything gradually calmed down when the sky was about to turn bright. Then Liu Baishui went to the cabin to calm people down, and everyone finally felt a little relieved. But these people did not know that for others, it was just the beginning. Wu Jiasong stood quietly on the side of the ship for a while. When the sun completely rose from the sea, he turned around and walked to the 3rd floor of the ship. The 3rd floor was where Li Yunxin and Liu Baishui lived. But Li Yunxin only stayed in his room for a while on the day of boarding, and then changed his appearance and went to the bottom of the cabin. But Wu Jiasong was familiar with the way as if he had been observing for a long time. When he walked to the door of Li Yunxin's room, he found that the door was unlocked. Without hesitation he reached out and gently pushed it open. He saw Li Yunxin standing on the carpet in the room with a piece of paper floating in front of him. A few rays of morning light shone in through the window and enveloped him. He could even see the fine dust particles flying in the light. Separated by a single door, it was like 2 different worlds. Outside there was the cold morning wind and the sound of waves. Inside the house, it was as warm as a spring day. It was so quiet that one could hear the rustling of clothes. Wu Jiasong took a step inside and closed the door behind him. He stood there quietly without making a sound. Seeing Li Yunxin stare at the painting for a while, he reached out and added a few more strokes. He then called out to him, "Great shopkeeper Wu, sit." Even more unforgettable was the scene of Xie Xing being brutally tortured to death. Wu Jiasong only hesitated for a moment. He said, "As far as I know, the master of Munanju is also called Taoist Clearwater. His other identity is the reincarnation of the art saint." Li Yunxin paused for a moment then smiled. "I thought you'd ask me to spend some effort. Smart man." "But the reincarnation of the art saint?" Li Yunxin looked at him. "Is it the art saint or the reincarnation of the art saint?" There was a big difference between the two. The art saint was naturally that art saint. But if he was reincarnated, after a person reincarnated, his temperament and even his gender could change drastically. He would no longer be that person, but a completely new person. If he was really the reincarnation of the art saint, he would certainly have a way to keep many things from the past. But, just look at Yu Meng. He still remembered that he was the sword saint and could subdue the glazed sword heart of his previous life. But he was no longer the calm and tranquil saint of the past. He even wanted to live in seclusion with his beauty under such circumstances. As far as I know, it's a reincarnation, Wu Jiasong said. Li Yunxin nodded and slowly walked away, dropping the handkerchief with which he wiped his hands. The white handkerchief disappeared into the void. The rest. Wu Jiasong said, I can't. Li Yunxin gently raised his hand to interrupt him. Forget it. I don't need you to say anything else. I just wanted to confirm my guess. If you say too much, you will die when you go back. Wu Jiasong was stunned. Li Yunxin seemed to be able to see his expression. You're not a beauty. Why should I bring you with me? I wanted to kill Xie Xing. Well, I wanted to let you vent your anger. I wanted to see if you knew how to repay a favor and if you could help me get some information from Pan He. But you did it. I admire you. So you still have to go back alive. Go tell the owner of Southernwood House. At this point, Li Yunxin walked back to the painting suspended in the void and pointed at it with his finger. I've painted Xie Xing's spirit into this painting. His memory and will are all preserved. But... He glanced at the painting and laughed. There's also a mermaid in this painting. He died quickly at night. It only took a moment. Now that he can't die, he has to experience everything with a clear mind. He has to experience it for as long as I want him to. But this guy's mouth is harder than I thought. He didn't say anything for 2 to 4 hours, but he was going crazy. I had to help him repaint it when his spirit was about to collapse so he could continue to experience it. You know, this kind of thing is very troublesome. Li Yunxin spread his hands. So I hope you can tell your art saint. In this way, I may be able to find out what I want to know, but I may not. If she doesn't want me to know anything, she'd better come to see me and tell me in person before Xie Xing's spirit collapses. Li Yunxin raised a finger and shook it. Don't be a clone. I want the real body. Wu Jiasong had been very calm since he entered the cabin. This kind of calmness was not clear whether it was calmness or a dead heart. But now that he heard that Li Yunxin was going to let him go, his expression finally loosened. He subconsciously looked at the painting, but as soon as he touched it, he quickly looked away. Dragon King. After hesitating for a long time, he said, if Dragon King wants me to go, to pass the message, I still have a few questions to ask Dragon King. Otherwise it's hard to say. Li Yunxin raised an eyebrow. You want to ask me why I didn't directly destroy Xie Xing's spirit and get what I want to know? Wu Jiasong was stunned again. Dragon King's foresight is like a god. It seems that you are also knowledgeable. Li Yunxin shook his head. Okay. Tell your master this. I was previously involved in this matter and it took me a lot of effort to get away. Now that I have found a backer like Shinryu, I really want to stay out of it and live a carefree life. But we all know this is impossible. I have caused a lot of trouble and it's hard to wash it off. Now that I have Xie Xing, he is actually a good target. Everyone's attention will be shifted to him and I can get away. So why should I kill him, keep his spirit in my hands and hold a big trouble? Wu Jiasong waited for him to continue. But the room was quiet again. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Li Yunxin said again, why? Wu Jiasong looked up blankly. But he found that Li Yunxin was not asking him. Instead he looked out of the window, but his eyes were not focused. His head drooped down again. Chapter 624. After a dozen breaths, he heard Li Yunxin say, tell this to your master. Wu Jiasong frowned. Dragon King, which ones? My exact words. Li Yunxin pursed his lips. Don't ask any more. Wu Jiasong could only say, yes. Then he heard Li Yunxin's voice become excited. Good. Now that we are done, tell me about you and Pan He. For example, how did you two get on the ship? How did you find out her true identity and how do you feel about it? This was the 4th time Wu Jiasong was stunned. This time he was stunned because he realized that Li Yunxin was just as the rumors said, unpredictable. It was hard to know when he would be happy and when he would turn against him. Sometimes he would talk about sages, and sometimes he would do some despicable and dangerous things. A moment ago he looked indifferent like a hermit, but the next moment he suddenly cared about his family. Such a person was scary, and hard to guess. Although Tseng Yanming would not take his life, Wu Jiasong still felt a slight chill. At the same time he was glad that he immediately told Li Yunxin everything. It was a wise choice. So he thought for a while and said in a low voice, Things may be different from what Dragon King thinks. This time, I really didn't come for Dragon King to see what she wants to do. Li Yunxin waved his hand. Tell me from the beginning. Don't go back in time, like how you met. Wu Jiasong didn't know if Li Yunxin's sudden interest had other purposes, so he didn't know what to hide and what not to hide. Considering Xie Sheng's previous experience, he could only sigh. Yes. The Freemasonry once domesticated some women in the East Sea Kingdom for infiltration, because they wanted to control the power of the human world like us. Their purpose was to send them everywhere as eyes and ears. But Dragon King knew that our power in the human world was formed much earlier than the Freemasonry. As soon as they started doing this, we knew. That's why those women were later bought. Actually, they were bought by our people. They didn't know. Li Yunxin laughed and said, "Wonderful. I like that kind of thing." Wu Jiasong wasn't careless because of his momentary happiness. He said cautiously, "What we're thinking is that if we keep the Freemason spies right under our noses, it'll be hard for them to guess. It was more convenient for observation and tracking." Pan He said that her sisters were all dead. In fact, they were all killed because they gradually realized that there was something wrong with the people around them. At the mention of Pan He, Wu Jiasong's voice paused. But his tone was still very calm. Li Yunxin laughed. She never noticed? So, he's really an idiot? Wu Jiasong shook his head slightly. That's because we thought that if we cast a wide net, we would only get some superficial information. Thus, they decided to groom a high-ranking official. Pan He was chosen. Therefore, those women were all killed, and some people who posed further obstacles to her were eliminated. Finally, she was made the ruler of Donghai. Li Yunxin laughed again. In the end, you found out last night that you gave your wife to someone else. Wu Jiasong was silent for a while. She's done what she did last night many times before. This time, it was Li Yunxin's turn to be silent for a while. Well, Wu Jiasong coughed softly. Li Yunxin shook his head. It's really not easy for you to be the manager. It's really painful to treat her as your wife and see her seducing others with her body. Wu Jiasong said in a low voice, but if she's just a spy, I think she's a spy who has feelings for me. It's not unbearable. Li Yunxin nodded. Then this time? This time she has no feelings for me. Wu Jiasong took a deep breath. Then I don't have to have feelings for her. Tiske. You guys love and hate each other. Li Yunxin looked at Wu Jiasong's expression with interest. And then? Continue. Wu Jiasong moved his feet slightly. Soon he suppressed his previous emotions. This time the Freemasonry got the news first. The news came in a hurry. She and I were in Whitewater Town, and she suddenly said she wanted to go to the East Sea chain. I didn't have time to spread the news, so I could only follow her on the ship and act according to the situation. I didn't know until I got on the ship that she was following Xie Sheng this time. Dragon King should know how important Xie Sheng is. I can decide other things by myself. But about Xie Sheng, I could only follow her and wait and see. Wu Jiasong let out a sigh. This is the beginning and the end of the matter. Oh. Li Yunxin drawled and nodded. He looked him up and down again and suddenly asked, But Pan, he always thought you were an ordinary person. How strong are your martial arts to be able to hide around her for so long? Wu Jiasong's voice sank. I'm sorry to make Dragon King laugh. All the martial arts in the world are originally derived from shallow Taoism. Therefore, when martial arts are cultivated to the peak, they will slowly enter the Taoism through martial arts. I'm not talented, but I can be considered to have entered the Taoism through martial arts. Li Yunxin nodded with understanding. Then I'll tell you one thing. You'd better not be the shopkeeper of the East Sea Kingdom. He looked at Wu Jiasong, who frowned slightly in surprise. It's a good thing to enter the Taoism through martial arts. But I heard that people like you from Southwood House can mix in the streets because you are ordinary people. But you, do you know how I saw through you? Your internal force has slowly transformed into spiritual force. But you don't have snow mountain or ocean of qi in your body. If one day the spiritual force in your body is full to a certain extent, you will explode. To use the term, it's qigong deviation. So now in the eyes of people like me, you are like a flame in the dark. You have been lucky these years and haven't met the Freemasonry people who know how to cultivate. Otherwise you would have been seen through. Wu Jiasong was stunned. Li Yunxin smiled slightly. So it's hard for you to be a shopkeeper. This time you lost your real prince. Do you want to jump ship and work for me? Wu Jiasong's expression turned serious. Dragon King. Dragon King, don't say such things again. My master has given me a new life. I am, Li Yunxin snorted. Look at your body now. I'm the one who gave you a new life. Didn't you feel good selling your master just now? Wu Jiasong said no more. He was afraid of angering the Dragon King in front of him. He looked down at the floor for a while, and then heard Li Yunxin take a few steps forward. Let's talk about the Dragon King on the sea. Since you are the shopkeeper of the East Sea Kingdom, you must know what the Dragon Sun on the sea is. Wu Jiasong still didn't hesitate. He only thought for a while as if he was organizing his words. Then he said, replying to the Dragon King. I don't know much about the Dragon King on the sea, but I have heard a rumor. But this rumor has no basis. I don't really believe it. Dragon King, forgive me for speaking nonsense, I will say it now. Li Yunxin glared at him. Don't be long-winded. Yes. Wu Jiasong slightly lowered his voice. There is a rumor that the Dragon Sun on the sea is indeed the son of Shinryu. And he was born by the ancestral dragon. The ancestral dragon? This is the rumor that even I find hard to believe. It says that before Shinryu was born, there was actually the ancestral dragon. Shinryu was born by the ancestral dragon. The Dragon King is the dragon son who was enfeoffed by Shinryu on land. And the Dragon King on the sea is the dragon son who was enfeoffed by the ancestral dragon on the sea. Li Yunxin frowned. After thinking for a while, he muttered something. But Wu Jiasong couldn't hear what he was talking about. Who did you hear this from? Ah, it was a coincidence. Wu Jiasong frowned and thought for a while. It was a few years ago. I was still young then, I heard this rumor. Before that, none of my ancestors had heard of it. They only said that someone died but came back to life. They said that his soul was taken by the king of hell and went to the underworld to meet the judge. The judge said that his life wasn't meant to end, and that he should enjoy wealth, so he came back to life. That person said that he met the ancestral dragon in the underworld. The ancestral dragon gave him immortal arts, and asked him to return to the world. Then he did some divination. Later on there was a famine in that area, and that person was hot-headed and led his people to rebel. He said that the ancestral dragon told him to return to the world and enjoy wealth, and that he must become the emperor. Just like that, there were more people gathered and the rumor spread. But it was quickly destroyed and that person died. Li Yunxin listened quietly and looked at him. You think he made it up? Wu Jiasong was stunned. I've never heard of it before, but there is indeed the dragon son of the sea. Li Yunxin smiled. What you told me is the rumor you heard. Let me guess. So you didn't say anything about the Dragon King of the Sea in Nanmuju, so you were afraid that I would be angry, so you quickly made up such a rumor to make up for it? Wu Jiasong's expression changed slightly. Dragon King. I just told you what I know. That's strange. You're the manager of the East Sea Kingdom and you have many eyes and ears. But you've never heard of the origin of the Dragon King of the Sea. Li Yunxin looked at him. Don't you think it's strange? We don't have to know everything and we have to investigate everything. After all, we have our own responsibilities. Li Yunxin waved his hand and shook his head. I'm afraid the owner of Nanmuju doesn't want you to know. Never mind, when she comes I'll ask her myself. Hearing this, Wu Jiasong wanted to say something but hesitated. After hesitating for a long time, when Li Yunxin walked back to the painting he said, Dragon King, my master. I'm afraid her realm is higher than Dragon King's. Dragon King is still. Li Yunxin turned his head. He stared at him expressionlessly. Wu Jiasong hurriedly shut his mouth, feeling a little numb. After 3 long breaths, he heard Li Yunxin say, So you think I called her here to find trouble with her, huh? Wu Jiasong didn't speak. He felt that he was standing on the edge of a volcano that could erupt at any time. But the volcano didn't erupt. Li Yunxin turned his face and waved his hand. Go. Get off the ship when you reach the chain of the East Sea. I'm busy torturing people to save people. I won't call you again, so don't bother me. Chapter 625. The huge ship was still sailing on the sea, about to reach the chain of the Eastern Sea. But at this point, it could only take the first step on the journey of thousands of miles. A person who wanted to go out for a walk walked out of his house. The ocean was so vast. Although it had sailed for more than 10 days, it was still very far away from the legendary Dragon Island, the border of the Eastern Sea, the boundary between the water and the weak water. 96. I lost 96 generals in a row. When he roared, the entire palace trembled slightly. People said, when you stamp your feet, the ground will tremble. This saying was used to describe him. When he roared, the entire space was indeed trembling, as if he was the embodiment of this space. The hall was dark, deep and empty. There was only a dragon throne facing the south. The tall walls were decorated with murals. The style of the lines in the murals was also very special. Some lines were simple and sharp as if they were pursuing a kind of power, concise beauty. But some lines were complex and gorgeous, as if they were pursuing another kind of indescribable beauty. These lines were mixed together to form a huge mural, showing an incomprehensible scene. The simple and sharp lines outlined many grand and majestic buildings. And the buildings were shrouded in clouds woven by complex and gorgeous lines, only revealing the eaves of the roof and the grand and tall bodies. In between these buildings, there were also flowers and grass as well as all kinds of birds and beasts. The painter seemed to want to use the majesty of the tall buildings to form a sharp contrast with these gorgeous and agile beasts, to express some kind of strong feeling that was hard for people to understand now. But it should not have been successful. In many people's opinion, the painting was too full. Not only did it not show vitality, but because of the huge size and the darkness of the palace, it seemed to be full of pressure, making people feel depressed. But at this time, with the anger of the people in the palace, it complemented each other. I personally appeared and caught that demon. I told you to watch carefully. And now you tell me that he swallowed another 3? He stood on the high platform with the dragon throne and roared angrily, "What do I need you for?" Below the high platform, there was a group of officials lying on the ground. However, these officials all had different appearances. They were all tall, short, fat, and thin. There were some tall ones. As long as they stood up, they would touch the roof of the hall. It was a roof that could only be reached by a dozen people standing together. There was a big one that was as big as a hill that filled up half of the hall. Every breath felt like a gust of wind. There were also some that were as small as the belly of a finger, and there were long strips that coiled all the way out of the hall. There were also some translucent wandering souls covered in seaweed, barnacles, and other parasites. It was hard to tell that they were humanoid. All these oddly shaped things lowered their heads in fear of the anger of the people on the stage, not daring to make a sound. The person on the stage, the Mr. Shueyu, whom Li Yunxin had met on the deck of the Taowu, paced around angrily for another 2 steps before pointing at the group of people. "General Jinlang, speak. What happened?" The person called General Jinlang was a short and fat man who looked like a human, but his eyes were not on his face. Instead, they were on the top of his head. He hurriedly lowered his head even more, but his eyes were looking straight at the stage. "Lord Donghai, please calm down. Lord Donghai, please calm down." After saying these 2 sentences in fear and trepidation, his tone changed. "But I have no other choice. The guy that Lord Donghai captured is at the peak of the true state. He has several treasures. Lord Donghai asked me to give him a hard time, but as soon as I opened the door, that guy rushed over and swallowed 3 generals. If I didn't run fast, I wouldn't be able to reply here. Lord Donghai, even you can't take away his magic treasures, let alone us." Mr. Shueyu, Lord Donghai, Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, widened his eyes. "What? You haven't subdued him yet? What about now? Where is he now?" General Jinlang said. "Except for Lord Donghai, who can subdue him. He is still wandering in the prison. I have already ordered people to withdraw. I think he won't be able to break the inhibition of the water prison in a short time. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Dragon King of the Eastern Sea raised his finger and pointed at him. You. After shouting a few times, he suddenly flicked his sleeve. Forget it, you guys." As he sighed, the demons in the hall seemed to be slightly relieved. They knew that the storm that came quickly this time also dispersed as quickly as usual. This Dragon King of the Eastern Sea sighed again. Then he pointed to the west side of the hall. "Let's not talk about this first. General of 100 Transformations, go and invite Lady Mingyue here." When he said this, his tone was much calmer and not as angry as before. So, as soon as he said this, there was immediately a cry in the hall. "Lord Donghai, please spare my life." This cry could be said to be mournful and melancholy, lingering in the hall. But the voice itself seemed to be blown out by a flattened trumpet, extremely unpleasant to the ears. Looking at the General of 100 Transformations, he was a fair-skinned man with 4 arms. At this time he stood up from the ground and was extremely terrified. "Lord Donghai, last time she asked me to call Lady Mingyue, but I was cut off by Lady Mingyue. Yesterday she asked me to go, and I was left with another arm." At this point the color of his face changed. It was not an analogy, but it really changed from white to dark blue, as if he was extremely depressed. "Lady Mingyue also said that if I call her Lady Mingyue again, she will cut off both my arms. If I bother her again she will cut off my head. Now Lord Donghai asked me to call her Lady Mingyue, and also asked me to summon her. Won't I die? Lord Donghai, please spare my life. Why don't you ask General Jinlang to atone for his crime? This Lady Mingyue seemed to be a terrible and ruthless character. As soon as the General of 100 Transformations said this, General Jinlang immediately jumped up. Lord, I will go to the water prison and meet that Lord Tong Tian again. Why don't we ask General Ku He to go? As soon as he said this, there were demons shouting again. In a short while the hall turned from silence to noise, almost tearing the roof off the hall. Lord Donghai stared at the farce with his eyes wide open. He wanted to scold them several times but he couldn't. It was as if, even he knew how difficult Lady Mingyue was to deal with. He stood there for a while, full of anger. Finally he snorted. Useless. All of you are useless. What's the use of you? I will go myself. With a flick of his sleeve he walked out angrily. Chapter 626. As soon as the Dragon King of the East Sea left the hall angrily, the noise in the hall stopped. Previously, the group of demon generals in the hall had pushed the blame to each other and almost started cursing and fighting. At this point, however, the anger on all the strange faces had disappeared, and had been replaced by a strange and mysterious excitement. It was like the expression on Li Yunxin's face when he asked Wu Jiasong about his relationship with Pan He on the ship far away. They stood up from the ground and remained silent for a while. General Jinlang lowered his voice and said, Let's open. I'll be the banker today. I bet that the Lord will be scolded again. When he comes back he will bet at least 3 treasures. The 100 Transformations General had previously pushed the fatal task to General Jinlang, but now he didn't have any grudges. He immediately shouted, Hey! No way. I see that the Lord and Lady Mingyue are getting better and better. I bet that he will be scolded again today, but he will be scolded. At this point he smiled mischievously and looked around. Still so happy. He laughed loudly. Many of the demon generals in the hall laughed along with him. The atmosphere inside and outside the hall was full of joy. The 100 Transformations General stretched out his hand. Come, collect the money. When the demons greeted the Lord of the East Sea, they showed their true human forms. The appearance of the demons after they transformed into humans. This was to show their respect to the Lord and not to hide their human forms. But now that Lord Donghai had left the hall, they all transformed into the size of ordinary people, and they still looked like normal people. If Li Yunxin, who had seen the world in Tongtian Swamp and Cloud Mountain, saw these demons now, he would be slightly surprised. This was because although the demons on the land had seen more mortals, they were still in strange shapes after turning into humans, and most of their faces were too horrible to look at. But now, the appearance of the demons in the hall mostly resembled that of humans. In terms of appearance alone there was no difference. The demons squeezed and squeezed. Some went to General Jinlong's side to bet, while others went to General Jinlong's side to bet. The wager was nothing else but copper coins. The polished copper coins were all cast by the various countries on the continent. Some were still in use today while others had long since been abolished. But these demons seemed to treasure it very much. But they also had a lot of gold and silver on their clothes, so it was strange that they loved this thing. The 100 Transformations General used his 4 arms to collect the money. Since he couldn't hold on to them anymore, he shook his body and stretched out the 2 arms that had been chopped off, to Lord Donghai. After the group of demons in the hall placed their bets, they called out to the outside of the hall. Immediately, a pointy but neckless little demon ran in. The colonel wasn't afraid to enter the hall. He smiled and stood at the door bowing. What orders do the generals have for me? This lowly one saw His Highness heading towards Lady Mingyue's side just now. Should I call this lowly one? As he said this, he smiled mischievously, his gaze falling on the copper coins in the 100 Transformations General's hands. The 100 Transformations General casually tossed 2 to him. Why ask when you already know? Quickly go and take a look. Come back and report back to this general. The colonel reached out to receive it, bowed again and ran away like a wisp of smoke. This group of extremely daring demon generals continued to shout and gamble in the hall for a while before someone finally talked about something else. The person who spoke had a yellow face and buck teeth, like a piece of rotten wood that had turned into a spirit. Originally, when the demons were bustling with noise, he was silent and seemed to be deeply worried. Now that the interest of the demons was slowly fading, he frowned and said with a bitter face, brothers, calm down and listen to me. After shouting like this 3 or 4 times, the hall slowly quieted down. But General Jinlong's face twitched and he kept winking at him. It was as if the two of them were hiding some secret, and he didn't want this person to say it. But the yellow-faced demon general ignored him, sighed twice and raised his hands. Brothers, you seem to be happy here, but don't you know that a disaster is coming? This sounded very scary. But the demons were stunned at first, then they all booed him and soon ignored him again. It seemed that this person often said this kind of thing and everyone was already used to it. But the yellow-faced demon general still said to himself, this time it's true, General Jinlang, and I heard that Lord Tongtian mentioned in the water prison, that Goddess Peng Lai is coming back. As soon as he said this, the hall immediately quieted down. About a third of the demon generals were stunned. The joyful expression on their faces disappeared, and was replaced by disbelief and surprise, but the surprise soon turned into fear. It was as if because of this sentence, the fear of a long time ago appeared in their minds again. The rest of them looked at each other, their faces very confused. They probably didn't know who Goddess Peng Lai was, but seeing the demon general's expressions, they also became confused and nervous. Seeing this scene, General Jinlang hurriedly said, General Mian, how can you say this? The yellow-faced demon general called General Mian sighed twice again. What do you mean by saying this? What did Lord Tongtian say when he came in? He said, you dare to catch me, have you heard of Wei River Dragon King? He is coming to save me. Did you tell him that Wei River Dragon King would not be able to find Mao Peng Lai even if he came to save you? General Jinlang frowned. That guy was talking nonsense. General Mian shook his head worriedly. If he was talking nonsense, how would he know about Goddess Peng Lai? Did he also say that Wei River Dragon King brought Goddess Peng Lai with him, so naturally he would know about your Mao Peng Lai? General Jinlang frowned and shook his head. What is there to worry about, Lord Donghai above? The yellow-faced demon general sighed heavily. This is what I am afraid of. Lord Donghai said angrily last night that he wanted to go to the sea to see who else was causing trouble. In the end he lost his temper again just now and didn't bring anyone back. Think about it. Did he suffer a loss last night? This time General Jinlang didn't say anything. The other demons were even more dumbfounded. After a while, some people started to ask who Goddess Peng Lai was. When General Mian heard this, he walked to the front of the demons and stood still. He said with a bitter face, there are many brothers who don't know. If others don't want to talk about this kind of scary thing, then let me do it. Who told me to always be the bad guy? That Goddess Peng Lai is the previous owner of Mao Peng Lai. When General Mian said this, his tone was slightly lighter, but his tone was heavier. 8,000 years ago, before our Lord Donghai obtained this celestial mountain, we were all under her. At that time, we weren't as carefree and happy as we are now. That Goddess Peng Lai is vicious and merciless. Now that we work under Lord Donghai, if we do something wrong, we will only hear him scold once or twice. What's the use of having you? If it was in the past, we would have been skinned alive if we weren't careful. Those of us who survived back then, which one of us didn't live in fear and trepidation every day? His words seemed to have stirred up the fear in the hearts of the demon generals in the hall. General Jinlang saw that the atmosphere wasn't right and hurriedly said, General Mian, don't talk about these scary things. But a demon general who hadn't personally experienced the past and thus didn't know the dangers asked curiously, what happened after that? After that? General Mian sighed and waved his hand as if waving something away. After that, that Goddess Peng Lai, perhaps because she committed too many sins, was punished by the heavens and lost all her power. But everyone was afraid of her despotic power in the past, and didn't dare to resist. Finally it was Lord Donghai. Lord Donghai discussed with us and decided to expel that Goddess Peng Lai from Mount Peng Lai. Thus, he risked his life on the Dragon Island and obtained a fortuitous encounter and godly power to force her to a corner of Mount Peng Lai. Do you still remember that there used to be a forbidden area in the west, where it was said that there was a ghost cave that led straight to the netherworld, and no one was allowed to go near it? When he said this, everyone nodded. Then someone cried out involuntarily, could it be that? That's where that Goddess Peng Lai stayed. She had a magic treasure there, and even Lord Donghai couldn't do anything to her, so he could only seal her there. Or 1 year ago, Madame Mingyue. Someone else shouted, Madame Mingyue came on a boat and accidentally broke Lord Donghai's restriction, so he let her go? General Mian said with a crying face, exactly. Since then I've been saying that it's going to be bad, but no one listened to me. Now that things have come to us, it's useless if you don't tell me. that goddess Penglai must have gone out and found her divine sense, so she came back with 2 helpers. Our good days are coming to an end. It seemed that the monsters didn't know what he said and heard from the 9th young master. Now that they knew, they all panicked. They didn't have time to gamble or place bets. There was an uneasy silence for a while, and then the hall exploded again. This group of monster generals began to decide what to do, but they didn't have many choices. They could either pray that goddess Penglai hadn't found her divine sense, or pray that Lord Donghai could take her down, or the worst-case scenario. If Lord Donghai was defeated, would goddess Penglai kill them all? If the demoness who was sealed in Li Yunxin's sleeve knew what was going on in the hall, she would be so proud that her tail would go up to the sky. Seeing that things had become like this, General Jin Lang was anxious. He rushed to General Mian's side and pulled him to a corner, raising his eyebrows. "Are you crazy?" Lord said not to mention this matter. General Mian shook him off. "You're the crazy one. Waiting for death. If it were up to me, we should quickly gather everyone. Lord is an undisciplined person. It'll be a few days before he makes a move. We should first go out to sea to check out the situation. That goddess Penglai has helpers. Let's first." He made a chopping motion with his hand. "Clean it up. It can be considered as helping Lord share his burden, and also as beating down their arrogance. We're familiar with the East Sea. Otherwise, when they swarm to Penglai Island, would you rather fight a bloody battle with me or me?" General Jin Lang opened his mouth. This is very important. Let's ask Lord first." General Mian angrily waved his hand. "Lord is head over heels in love with that Madame Mingyue. He's no longer the Lord of the past. Wait for him." He looked like he was about to say something treacherous again. General Jin Lang hurriedly waved his hand. Okay, let me think about it." Chapter 627. The hall was in a state of chaos. Outside the other hall, it wasn't a comfortable scene either. Compared to the hall where Lord Donghai and the demon generals discussed matters, this palace was more like the style on land. It was built on a pillar, which stood on the east coast of Penglai Island and was connected to the island by a slender arch bridge that looked like a rainbow. The area on the pillar was very wide. It could probably fit the entire Qing Kingdom's imperial palace on it. Rather than a pillar, it was more like a towering, flat mountain. The top of the mountain was covered with colorful vegetation and surrounded by the glow of the palace. There were also several waterfalls falling from the edge of the cliff like jade. But this huge stone pillar was too tall. When the water fell near the sea, it all turned into mist. This was why the pillar floated on the sea of clouds all day long like a fairyland. The palace was built in the middle. To the west there was a square paved with white jade. There were cranes, colorful phoenixes, and divine turtles strolling in the square. There were children in colorful clothes chasing and playing. Lord Donghai stood on this square and looked into the hall. There were no doors or windows in the hall, only pillars and light muslin. However, it was dark inside the hall. It was as if there was an invisible force blocking the light outside, preventing people or things in the hall from being seen. Lord Donghai stared at the darkness for a long time before sighing. "I didn't expect what you said to be true." But no one answered him. He put his hands behind his back and walked a few steps on the white jade tiles. "You said at first that your son was the Dragon King of the land, but I didn't believe it. Alas, last night I saw him. He was really good. He broke one of my incarnations and sealed it. The Baihua general said he came to invite you twice and cut off his arm both times. No matter how he tried, he couldn't grow it back. Was the way he sealed my incarnation the same as what you did to the Baihua general? Not only did he cut it off, but he also sealed it?" There was still no sound in the hall. The cranes in front of the hall and the children playing were originally very pleasant to listen to, but now Lord Donghai only felt annoyed. He frowned and waved his sleeve. Those red-crowned cranes, colorful phoenixes, men and women immediately turned into pieces of paper and floated down from the sky. Thus the world finally quieted down. "Your son is going to fight his way to our door. Do you have the guts not to say anything?" "Humph," Lord of the Eastern Sea said angrily, "I've been treating you with courtesy for the past year and I didn't chop off the 100 transformations general's arm." The person in the hall finally spoke. It was a pleasant female voice, but it was hard to tell her age. But just by listening to this voice, he felt that it belonged to a beautiful and quiet woman. Lord Donghai was taken aback. After a breath's time he frowned. "This octopus. How dare you lie to me? Now that he's here, you're in big trouble." The female voice in the palace continued, it's not too late to regret now. Otherwise, when your immortal mountain and those demon generals are no longer yours, it will be too late to regret. Lord Donghai snorted disdainfully. Regret? Ah, when have I ever regretted anything? You think I'm afraid of him? He's just a kid, but I've heard that those who treat him as a kid don't end up well. The voice in the palace interrupted him. If you didn't treat him as a kid, he wouldn't have chopped off one of your avatars. Lord Donghai, the female voice paused. Why don't you let me go now and avoid this trouble? Lord Donghai's eyes widened. Don't even think about it. Back then however, he was interrupted once again. The female voice in the palace lowered a little. So what does he look like now? Lord Donghai frowned. He said reluctantly, he has a good appearance and he looks like you. He doesn't speak pleasantly. The way he speaks is so annoying. He must be like that Li Chunfeng. The person in the palace sighed. But it didn't seem to be sadness but something inexplicable. He doesn't look like Li Chunfeng. Li Chunfeng he is also a gentle and elegant person. Lord Donghai pursed his lips. There was a breeze around them. But now the breeze suddenly turned into a small whirlwind. With a buzz, the pieces of paper on the ground were swept away. Li Chunfeng. His voice turned cold as if he was thinking of a great enemy. Don't let me meet him on the East Sea. No. Sooner or later I'll go to the land and catch him. I'll cut him into pieces. I'll avenge you. The person in the palace stopped talking. Lord Donghai gritted his teeth for a while. Seeing that he was ignored again, he quickly said, Fine, I won't mention that person. Let me ask you something else. My doppelganger has been destroyed and sealed by Li Yunxin. What is he trying to do? Who is more capable now, you or him? After a while, the person in the palace said, If I were you, I wouldn't ask me who is more capable. I was trapped here by you, but he was able to seal your clone. The result is self-evident. I have to advise you again, it's not too late to regret. I don't like to see more disasters. Why do you want to get yourself into trouble? These words hit Lord Donghai's sore spot. Suddenly angry, he rode away on the demon wind without saying a word, knocking down a large number of trees by the cliff. After a while, he heard a voice from the sky, You haven't seen what I can do. The Lord of East Sea left the isolated island in a rage, only to run into the officer sent by the demon generals to gather information. The officer didn't expect his lord to come back so soon after meeting Madame Mingyue. He was caught sneakily lurking on the bridge. Halfway there, he didn't know if he should go forward or retreat. In a panic, he crouched on the ground and covered his head with his hands. But Lord Donghai only glanced at him and landed, yelling, Where are they? Are they still in the palace? He knew what the demon generals were up to, but he didn't care. This was exactly as General Mian had said, their Jun Shang had an undisciplined temperament. Seeing that Lord Donghai wasn't angry, the officer immediately got up and said with a smile, My lord, they are all in the palace. After saying this, he took 2 steps closer and said in a low voice, I saw, General Jinlang will be scolded for holding you, but General Baihua will be happy to bring you back. My lord, in my opinion, it's better to let General Jinlang catch you. Lord Donghai glared at him, How dare you? What use do you have for making trouble all day long? The officer shivered and quickly hid behind Lord Donghai, walking quickly with him on the bridge. However, after a dozen steps, Lord Donghai stopped. The officer almost bumped into his shoulder. He hurriedly took 2 steps back only to hear Lord Donghai say, Forget it. You go back first and tell them I am having a good chat with Madame Mingyue. Chapter 628. On hearing this, the captain sprang up, jumped off the bridge and fell like a stone into the sea. Lord Donghai looked down and then back. In the dense and colorful flowers and trees, cranes chirped and children played again. He snorted, no one knew what he snorted, flicked his sleeves again and rode a gust of wind to the north of the island. Looking at Mount Penglai from the sky, one would find that it was a relatively regular circle. The slopes were relatively gentle with a long coast and snow-white beaches. Except for a tall stone pillar in the east, there were only sporadic short pillars protruding out of the sea on the other 4 sides. But the area above these short pillars was roughly the same as the area of Madame Mingyue's residence. There were also plants and buildings on some of them which seemed to be inhabited. If he rose higher, he would find that Mount Penglai was shrouded in clouds and mist. This layer of clouds and mist was very thin. If he looked from the coast, he wouldn't feel that it was obstructed. But if he looked from the very far sea, He could only see a vast expanse of whiteness in the distance, and couldn't see the trace of the spirit mountain. But he wouldn't feel that there was something hiding in the distance, just that it didn't exist. Li Yunxi knew this kind of experience. It was very similar to the smog in his world when it was not so serious. But the fog around Mount Penglai was not fine dust, but water mist. It took Lord Donghai a quarter of an hour to fly to one of the many short islands in the north. On the way he paused slightly and slowed down. This was what he was used to doing. When he looked at the Mount Penglai that now belonged to him from the sky, he was like a lion patrolling his territory. This gave him a sense of belonging and power, even compared with things like East Sea Dragon King and Mysterious Realm Monster. There was nothing more comforting and self-confident than owning an island. But maybe there was one. Something happened recently. That was Li Chunfeng. Madame Mingyue rarely mentioned this name. Everything he knew about Li Chunfeng came from the bits and pieces that Lady Mingyue had unwittingly let slip out of her mouth. Although there were few positive comments from those words, Lord Donghai still pieced together the man's image. He should have a good appearance. Even a beautiful lady like Madame Mingyue couldn't deny this fact. He should also have a good character. The Lord of the East Sea felt that he was the kind of person who was unrestrained, but also meticulous when he was gentle. He also had a decent cultivation base. That was a man. However, a man who had entered the profound realm after only a few hundred years of cultivation. However, he didn't look like a cultivator who had abandoned all emotions and desires. On the contrary, he looked like an ordinary mortal. But he had also caused Madame Mingyue's heart to break, because of some kind of deception. This man made Lord Donghai feel uneasy, for he could not seem to find a single aspect in which he could outdo him and despise him. Therefore this person also made Lord Donghai angry. He wanted to destroy him. However, it was probably difficult for him to meet Li Chunfeng. So this anger, mixed with other emotions, is projected on another. That person was now on the surface of the East Sea. With so many things on his mind, Lord Donghai landed on a small island in the north. This island was not connected to Penglai Island by a bridge. But there was no need to. The slender and beautiful long bridge where Madame Mingyue lived was built by Lord Donghai to make the island worthy of her identity. For this reason he also set up a restriction around the island. Those who were below the true realm couldn't fly in the air and could only walk on the bridge. But the person who lived on this island was not worthy of Lord Donghai's great efforts. In fact, for Lord Donghai this person was like a slippery poisonous snake. It made people afraid and instinctively want to stay away from it. But he had to hold it in his hand in order to hurt his enemy. This guest called himself Huang Guanzi and claimed to be from the Freemasonry. Lord Donghai descended from the cloud. He saw Huang Guanzi was already standing in the courtyard of the bamboo house where he stayed, waiting for him with one hand behind his back. He looked like a thin man about 40 years old, with a wretched appearance, like a mouse that had gained enlightenment. However, he claimed to be a human and liked to take care of the two sparse yellow mustaches on his upper lip. Huang Guanzi had the cultivation of the true realm. It was said that he used to be a cultivator of Daotong who secretly attached himself to the Freemasonry. After the Battle of Yunshan, Shenmen collapsed, and he became a capable general of the new Freemasonry. This was what Huang Guanzi said. But Lord Donghai felt that his words were 70% true, based on his limited knowledge of the land and some details revealed by Madame Mingyue. Seeing the big demon land, Huang Guanzi looked at him carefully and laughed. His laughter was sharp and slippery, like a weasel being strangled. Lord Donghai, did you go to see Madame Mingyue again? If you did as I said, you wouldn't have to be so distressed. Lord Donghai, do you understand now? The demon frowned and looked at him. After a moment of silence he said, I still think Master's method is too risky. If I am not careful, I'm afraid I will lose everything. Huang Guanzi laughed again and gestured with his sleeve. Lord Donghai, please sit down. While speaking, he sat down on a stone bench in the courtyard, stroked his mustache and narrowed his eyes. Lord Donghai, things are happening now. It's not about whether you can do it or not, but it's already here. Lord Donghai said that in the past, the Shinryu strictly restrained you, Dragon's son, and didn't let you get involved in the affairs on the land. They also told you how vast the sea was, and how crowded and boring the land was, so that you really felt that the people on the land were all uncivilized barbarians, weak and unworthy of your attention. But these years, haven't you gradually learned about it yourself? Just from the information you got from those shipwrecked people who occasionally drifted to the island, Lord Donghai should have understood how wonderful the land was. Now there is Madame Mingyue. Is there anyone like her on the sea? Lord Donghai has secretly gathered talents from the land to work for himself. But Lord Donghai, Huang Guanzi said earnestly, what's the use of this? Those coastal people, even if they have the so-called skilled craftsmen, they are nothing in Midland. Compared to Lord Donghai's Dragon Palace, the residence of a human emperor in Midland is more than 100 times more splendid. Lord Donghai can't really set foot on the land and you can't know the wider world. Lord Donghai frowned and listened to him, then slowly sat down. In fact, Huang Guanzi had said this many times and it was the truth. The Shinryu never liked to have contact with the things on the land. These years, the Shinryu didn't like to show up, and gradually learned about the people and things on the land. Lord Donghai was confused, but seeing him like this, Huang Guanzi's expression changed, and his tone turned serious. He bowed to the devil and said, Lord Donghai, now, since you have talked to that Li Yunxing yesterday, I have to say something disrespectful. There are some treasonous words that I have no choice but to say. The devil frowned and said, what? Huang Guanzi said, Lord Donghai, forgive me first, then I dare to say it. The devil sighed and said, why do you say this? What can we talk about? I don't blame you, sir. Go ahead. Only then did Huang Guanzi sit up straight and stroke his mustache. But he already had a wretched appearance, so this made him look even more comical. He said, Lord Donghai met with Li Yunxing. You should know that Li Yunxing is an outstanding person. I don't want to be disrespectful, but he is not much weaker than Lord Donghai now. The devil's face darkened. He frowned and moved his lips. But in the end he didn't say anything. You are right, sir. Huang Guanzi said seriously, think about what I said to Lord Donghai. Under Cloud Mountain the Shinryu showed up. Call the second dragon's son Lord Tong Tian, and the ninth dragon's son Lord Wei to the Dragon Island. Lord Donghai has been asking around for information these days, you should know that I am not exaggerating. Lord Donghai sighed again, yes. Then this is where things go wrong. Huang Guanzi also sighed, two outstanding people. In a short period of time they have outstanding cultivation and they know Tao. Now they have the favor of the Shinryu and will be summoned to the Dragon Island. In the past, the Dragon Son of the Sea and the Dragon Son of the Land had nothing to do with each other. In my opinion, the Shinryu used the Dragon Son of the Land to do things, to control and intimidate the demons on the land. And the Dragon Son of the Sea is used to protect the Dragon Island. The emperors of the world also have such a thing. The border army is used to quell the chaos, and the imperial guards are used to protect the emperor's palace. The two usually do not meet to prevent the border army and the imperial guards from colluding, having wild ambitions and doing bad things. But now, the Shinryu actually summoned them to the Dragon Island, to ask the two foreign officials to enter the capital. Lord Donghai, Huang Guanzi said meaningfully, there is one thing you know. 1,000 years ago, the original owner of Penglai Island lost the favor of the Shinryu and lost all his magic power. Now, it has been another 1,000 years. The demon suddenly frowned and was stunned. After a while, he stared at Huang Guanzi. You mean? Huang Guanzi shook his head mysteriously. I didn't say anything. Lord Donghai should have thought about these things yourself. I just feel that it is too ridiculous and hard to imagine. Now that I have spoken my own thoughts, I feel that I have the same thoughts. Lord Donghai, you actually know everything. The two sat in the courtyard facing each other for a while, only the faint sound of the wind could be heard. After a long time, Lord Donghai stood up with a solemn face, walked a few steps with his hands behind his back and turned back. Penglai is the gateway to the Dragon Island. But the Lord Donghai did not ask me to let anyone go to the Dragon Island. She did not even mention this. If she really intended to ask them, Huang Guanzi smiled slightly and twirled his beard again, but accidentally pulled out a strand. He frowned and looked at his hand quickly, and then put it down quietly. He carefully kept the beard. What I said just now is just one of the reasons why Lord Donghai had to act. The two Dragon Son of the Land are favored by the Lord Donghai, and are already a threat to Lord Donghai. Chapter 629. What the Lord of the Eastern Sea is talking about is the second reason why we have to act. Lord of the East Sea is right. If you want to summon them to the island, why not ask Lord of the East Sea to let them go? Even if she doesn't want you to know about this, she should have given them a secret passage. However, Lord Shinryu is not an outsider. If she really asked them to go to the Dragon Island secretly because of Lord of the East Sea, wouldn't she be afraid of Lord of the East Sea? That would be a big joke. Lord of the East Sea is majestic. How could he be afraid of his subordinates? Then, it can only be because of another thing. Huang Guanzi smiled and pointed at the demon in front of him. She wants to ask Lord of the East Sea to be a door god and a testing stone. Lord of the East Sea will not be happy to let them pass, so there will be a conflict. If you fight, you'll be the last trial. If they are really powerful, they can defeat Lord of the East Sea and go to the Dragon Island. Then Lord will naturally be irreplaceable. If they are not powerful enough and are defeated by Lord of the East Sea, it will mean that Lord of the East Sea is much stronger than them. That meant that the Divine Lord was much stronger than them. Even if the Divine Lord wanted to find a few new favored officials, he would have to spend more time. Lord of the East Sea can use this time to turn the tide. Lord of the East Sea, am I right? The demon was stunned for a while and frowned. Sir, these are all your speculations. Huang Guanzi laughed. This kind of speculation is not uncommon. In fact, this kind of thing is the most common on the land. Lord of the East Sea doesn't understand the countries on the land. The emperors and officials of the dynasties on the land like to play this kind of trick the most. When Jun Shang looked at these things, he felt that they were in the clouds and were all just speculations. But in the eyes of those people, it is no different from telling you in black and white. This is called the way of officialdom, the way of power. Otherwise, Lord of the East Sea, think about it. 1,000 years ago, you suddenly got the favor of Shinryu and owned Mount Penglai. What is the reason? Lord of the East Sea can't figure it out. Maybe there are many similar points at that time, but you just can't see them. 8,000 years ago, Lord of the East Sea was lucky and got everything. Now, another 1,000 years. Lord of the East Sea still wants to rely on luck and let things develop? The demon's frown deepened. He only cared about pacing in the hall. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, he finally said, But, Huang Guanzi sighed, no buts, Jun Shang. The worst-case scenario is that we misunderstood the Divine Lord's intentions. He had killed 2 of her favorite land-based dragon son. But under such circumstances, what could a Divine Lord do? At most, I'll just reprimand you. I've already lost 2 of my best men. Do you really want to lose a 3rd one? But if we're right and you don't make a move, the consequences will be dire. Is Jun Shang willing to use your cultivation in future to gamble on this? Is Lord willing to part with Penglai Island? Huang Guanzi sat on the stone block, his body steady as if it had grown roots. But his tone suddenly deepened. What's more, Jun Shang has another reason. If that Li Yunxin breaks into Penglai Island and takes Lady Mingyue away. Lord Donghai froze. The hesitant look on his face was swept away. He suddenly turned his face and looked fiercely at the Taoist priest from the Freemasonry. Sir, tell me, what should I do? Huang Guanzi slapped his palm fiercely. This is what we want Lord Donghai to be like. Lord Donghai, listen to me. Let's divide this matter into 3 steps. The first step is to eliminate Li Yunxin's henchmen. As far as I know, he brought 2 assistants with him. One of them, Lord Tong Tian, has been captured by Jun Shang. The other one has a mediocre cultivation and is nothing to be afraid of. So, Jun Shang has completed the first step. The second step is to take down that Li Yunxin. Huang Guanzi straightened up excitedly. I came to Penglai this time because I have the responsibility of the Freemasonry Society. Although you and I belong to different forces, we have the same goal in this matter. Jun Shang doesn't want Li Yunxin to appear in Donghai and land on Dragon Island. And we want to capture the culprit who destroyed Yunshan and the Freemasonry. So the second step is to capture him alive. Lord Donghai frowned when he heard this. He's in the mysterious realm. It's already very difficult to kill him. Capturing him alive is easier said than done. Huang Guanzi smiled. Isn't Lord Tong Tian in Jun Shang's hands? Since Shinryu appointed Lord Tong Tian to come to Dragon Island, he must be an important person. Although we don't know, but Li Yunxin should know clearly. So he must come to save him. You and I will wait at ease. First, we will use that Lady Mingyue, Sheng Guanyu as a threat, and then use this Lord Tong Tian, the 9th young master, as a threat. We don't need to worry that he won't fall for it. Speaking up to this point, he saw Lord Donghai's hesitant expression, so he smiled again. Don't worry, Jun Shang. I know what you want to say. As for Li Yunxin, he doesn't care about some people, but he will definitely take care of others. We have fought with him for so long and suffered many losses. This is one of the few gains we have. Let's send someone to provoke him first. Provoke him into anger and then lead him to the depths of the East Sea. Jun Shang once told me that the East Sea is vast, and there are many powerful monsters in the depths that even Jun Shang can't control. When the time comes, we will send someone to provoke them and they will definitely fight. Let Li Yunxin fight with those monsters. take turns to wear them down for a period of time. Whether those monsters are defeated or Li Yunxin is defeated, it will be a good thing for Junshang. Then we will lead him to the formation we have set up." Lord Donghai frowned in thought and suddenly interrupted him. "Do you know the art of painting, mister? My clone was sealed by Li Yunxin. I heard from Lady Mingyue that the art of painting is very magical. I'm afraid that he has sealed my clone because he has some unfathomable method." Hearing this, Huang Guanzi laughed. "You worry too much, Lord Donghai. Lord Donghai, in my opinion, after Li Yunxin destroyed your clone and sealed it, he must have pretended to study that piece of paper for a long time. In the eyes of others, they only think that he really has some ability and is really going to do something." Lord Donghai? When the great fiendish demon in front of him heard that, his expression changed. Huang Guanzi noticed the change in his expression and blinked. "Is there anything you haven't told me, Lord Donghai?" The demon said with a little embarrassment. "You are right, mister. Last night my clone was destroyed. I was really nervous. I don't know what tricks this guy on the land has that I don't know. So I sent another clone to watch from afar. I saw Li Yunxin stay on the deck of that ship for a long time, drawing on that piece of paper." Speaking of this, he stopped. He was the Dragon King of the East Sea, a big demon in the mysterious realm. After his clone was sealed in his own home, he immediately became so timid that he only dared to watch from afar for the time being. Who would dare to say this kind of thing? Huang Guanzi didn't want to laugh at him. He just raised his hand and gently touched his beard. "That's it. Think about it, if he really wanted to use the art of painting to do something, it would be too late to hide it. How could he openly show it to others on the East Sea, knowing that this world is one with him? This is clearly a show for Lord Donghai to see. It is to make you not dare to do anything to him for the time being, not to mention the 9th young master." He changed the topic and sneered. "A month ago, Li Yunxin succeeded with the art of painting and I was worried. Now, he thinks he is clever and messes up the spiritual qi in the world so that mortals can no longer cultivate, and also made the Shenmen fall apart. But he forgot that for people like us, it is only cultivation that has become difficult. Most of the divine abilities that we should have can still be used with some slight adaptations. But his art of painting originally wanted to depict the spiritual qi of all things in the world in detail into the scroll. In the past, although the qi between heaven and earth was unpredictable, it was like the undercurrent above the East Sea. It looked chaotic, but there was always a pattern. Now that he stirred the world, the spiritual qi danced wildly, and it would take tens of thousands of years to calm down. He couldn't use much of his painting skills, especially the more profound ones. He relied on his demon body, and in the end he cut off one of his arms. Seeing that Lord Donghai was still frowning, he knew that he was just talking to his heart's content. But he forgot that this big demon lived on the sea for a long time and didn't care about the land, so he didn't know much about Tao. So he patiently waved his hand in the air. A small pool of water appeared in the void. He blew into the water again, and dense whirlpools appeared on the surface, splashing water everywhere. "Lord Donghai, please look. This pool of water is like the qi between heaven and earth in the past. Although there are many whirlpools and they look chaotic after a long time, we still know how many whirlpools there are, how they spin, and how strong they are. So when we cast spells, we follow the whirlpools. This way we can move mountains and fill the sea with half the effort." The art of painting is similar. They also observe the number of whirlpools, the direction, and the strength. Then they use special techniques to simulate these on magic paper. After that, when we use the art of painting, it is like controlling a marionette. We only need to move the things on the magic paper, and the whirlpools in the real world will also be affected. At this point, he put his hand into the water again and stirred it up violently. "Lord Donghai, look again. This is the current state of the spiritual qi between heaven and earth. Everything has been messed up by him. We are in the whirlpool, and although it is chaotic, we can occasionally catch up with the tide and we can still cast spells. But that Li Yunxin uses the art of painting, so he must first simulate the chaotic situation on the magic paper before he can reverse it and use it on the pool of water. But now there are no rules, just like how my hand is stirring the water, he can't use it no matter how powerful he is. The reason why I told Lord Donghai not to worry is because of how vast the East Sea is, and how chaotic the spiritual qi is. But now he has shot himself in the foot, so he can only stay on the deck and put on an act for others to see." Huang Guanzi's eyes shone with a fervent light. "We have suffered a lot from him. Now we have finally found out everything about him. With the right time, the right place, and the right people, we must make him pay all the debts he owes in the past. How would he know that there is a person like me beside Lord Donghai?" Chapter 630. Huang Guanzi danced with joy and laughed. This was one of his rare moments of joy. This guy looked funny and he seemed to know it. Therefore he always had an inscrutable look as if he wanted to use his temperament to save his appearance. Although the effect was minimal, it was better than nothing. Now that he had lost his composure, it was truly unsightly. Dong Haijun looked away in embarrassment and coughed. Well, why don't you tell me what to do next? Huang Guanzi sat down again and grinned. Next, Dong Haijun, let's beat him at his own game. Since Li Yunxin wants to use painting methods to make Jun Shang hesitate in taking action, then Jun Shang will really let him think so. Send some demon soldiers and demon generals to attack him and pretend to take away the painting in his hand. Li Yunxin thinks that his plan has succeeded, so he won't push too hard. He always likes to plan before taking action. Then take this opportunity to find more helpers. Dong Haijun. Huang Guanzi became serious again. Lord Dong Hai will find the remaining 8 Dragon Kings and ask them for help. Dong Haijun frowned. What for? Huang Guanzi shook his head. Don't worry, my lord. Listen to me again. In the beginning, Shinryu was afraid of the power of the Dragon Sun on land, so they did not dare to attack them easily. Later they were greatly weakened by the power of Li Yunxin. She is afraid of the Dragon Sun on land, so how can she not be afraid of the sea, which is closer to her? In my opinion, the reason why those people lost favor 1,000 years ago is actually the same reason why emperors in the human world change their generals every once in a while. Shinryu did not let them have power for too long, because they were afraid that they would not be able to control it. I guess, Dong Haijun is different from the Dragon Sun on land. Shinryu may have a way to take back the power of the Dragon Sun on the sea, but they can't do anything about the land. Dong Haijun, think about it. Do you know the reason? The demon looked at him and did not say anything. After a while he said, I don't know either. Huang Guanzi smiled. I'm just asking casually. Let's continue. Dragon King summoned the others. Firstly, it was to ensure his safety and to take down that Li Yunxin. Secondly, he wanted to show it to Shinryu and let her know that Jun Shang is not the Lady Penglai of the past. If something happens to Jun Shang and the others, and the world is in chaos right now, it might cause the Eastern Sea's water tribes to become restless, making things difficult for her. This is the best of both worlds. Jun Shang must do this. Lord Dong Hai hesitated for a while and paced back and forth in the courtyard. Then he stood up and looked at Huang Guanzi. When you came here, you were invited by me as an outsider, to teach me some of the local customs of the land. Only then did I find out about Mr.'s talent, the Freemasonry that Mr. resided in, and more inside information about the struggles on land. But there's one thing I don't understand today. You're such a calm and peaceful person. Why do you have such a drastic change in mood when you mention Li Yunxin? Why do you even want me to join forces with other Dragon Kings on the sea to annihilate him? What's the inside story? Huang Guanzi seemed to be thirsty from all the talking and was about to reach for the conch pot on the table. Hearing Lord Dong Hai's question, his arm hung in the air, and the expression on his face became strange. Lord Dong Hai knew that he had asked the right question. There was indeed something hidden about him. But when he looked again he found that Huang Guanzi's face had turned red. About 2 or 3 breaths of time passed. Huang Guanzi withdrew his hand, turned his face away, and coughed to suppress the redness on his face. Then he calmed himself down and looked at Lord Dong Hai, who had an expression that said, just say it, what's the big deal? Since Lord Dong Hai has asked, there's nothing to hide. He frowned. There's a female cultivator on Mount Yinshan, called Xan Shilyo. I adore her. But she died in the hands of Li Yunxin. For the sake of my Taoist heart, I must capture Li Yunxin and bring him back to me to kill him. The demon didn't want to hear such an explanation and was stunned for a moment. After a while he laughed. There's actually such a thing? He saw Huang Guanzi's expression gradually become uneasy. Then he said, I don't mean anything else, I'm just surprised. Master told me that the cultivation of the cultivators of the Shenmen must abandon all desires. In the end, Master fell in love with a female cultivator. Speaking of this, he laughed again. But it was not a mocking smile nor a fake one but a genuine one. But Master is a sentimental person like me. This is good, but since it's over you have to let it go. You used to adore each other. Now that he's gone, it's only right to settle the score with him. Huang Guanzi coughed lightly. If it weren't for the love tribulation between us with my talent, I wouldn't be stuck in the true state. This battle is not only related to Lord Dong Hai but also to me. Lord Dong Hai, let's work together and take what we need. There will be many opportunities for cooperation in the future. Lord Donghai sighed and glanced in the direction of Lady Mingyue in the east. I hope so. Li Yunxin shouldn't have come to the East Sea, and he shouldn't have gotten involved in her affairs. After saying this, he cupped his hands. Master. Since I've made up my mind, I'll do it immediately. I'll first instruct the generals to prepare the troops, and then act according to the plan. In a few days, I'll come again to finalize our formation strategy. I'll have to trouble Master for the next few days. Huang Guanzi solemnly cupped his hands. Don't worry, Lord Donghai. I'll do my best in this matter. So the big demon nodded and left with the wind. Huang Guanzi stood in the courtyard for a while. After about 10 minutes, Lord Donghai had gone far away, and his divine sense couldn't easily reach here. Only then did he slowly put his hand into his sleeve and took out something. It was none other than a strand of beard that he had accidentally plucked from his lips. He stared at the beard for a while, then reached out to touch his lips, and another 3 or 4 strands fell off. The beard was sparse to begin with, but now it was thicker on one side and thinner on the other, making it even more comical. Huang Guanzi seemed to be angry. He simply pulled left and right, pulling out the beard on both sides. Then he took out a pen and added 2 more strokes to his lips, leaving 2 black marks on them. The black marks quickly changed into 2 new strands of beard. Huang Guanzi touched the 2 strands of beard and drew on his body with the pen, as if he was mending something. When he was done, he let out a sigh of relief and looked to the east for a while. He used to have a wretched appearance. But now his eyes were very melancholy, which made his temperament different. If Lord Donghai was here, he would think that he was missing Xan Shiliu, who died because of Li Yunxin. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.